Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Garrett Smith, also known as the Nutrition Detective around these here YouTube parts. And today we have a special episode from me, all about the glucose and dextrose powder fad that has kind of torn through the low vitamin A communities and other areas, and people have jumped on it. A lot of them. A lot of people haven't. A lot of people said, this is sugar powder. This doesn't fix anything. And that was the correct assumption to make. But a lot of people decided to try it and they started feeling better right away, like almost like a drug-like effect. And so being kind of the wise old sage person of the low vitamin A world, and having seen these trends come and go and these fads come and go, and being that my ultimate goal is always to get down to the root cause of things and not just to medicate them with drug-like isolated powders in general, and knowing that things taken in high doses are intended to cause drug effects, I wanted to do this show to kind of destroy this whole notion. Now, I want to give thanks to Will Neville for helping with some of the ideas that I'm going to go over here. And I want to thank Kelsey Kenny for helping with some of the research. She found some cool stuff and sent it to me. I have gone over this in several of my live streams a little bit, and I've gone over it in several of my Inner Circle videos, the private live stream I do inside the Love Your Liver Network. And I wanted to do one big one because the research that we find, just wait till we get to the testosterone research and glucose. It's not good. So let me head into this right now. Just so you know, if you want I'm not going to be posting the individual links in the chat today. The individual links I just put in the live chat. I put the Google Doc where all the links are. So you can do that. I actually did a lot of prep for this. You'll see that Google Doc, and it's impressive with the amount of research in there. And then I will be putting that Google Doc link down in the video info once this video is up. So you can go and look at those as you will, and then we'll have the timestamps for people to go through. So, and if you didn't know, I show the screen with the website link on it, so you can always go look it up. Okay. So first, we're going to go through a little bit of the history of how this came about. Now, I also want to say anyone who kind of fell for this or got into it, you're forgiven. These things happen. I'm kind of like in all of this, I'm kind of like a parent watching their child think they figured something out and going, that's not going to end well, but I need to let you make that mistake so you can learn. Consequences are the best teacher. So for those of you who have tried it or you're trying it and you're going, well, Dr. Smith, I don't believe you. I'm doing great on it. My car worked fine until it broke. If glucose solved anything, don't you think we would have figured it out along the way? So let me emphasize something else important here. Am I going anti-carb? No. And if you accuse me of that, you missed the boat and you should stop breathing out of your mouth. I have not gone anti-carb. I'm saying taking spoonfuls or cupfuls of sugar powder to suppress your symptoms is a bad idea, and that's what it's doing. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we're going to say, and also no super chats today. Don't post any super chats unless they are directly related to today's topic. And I may hit them along the way, but don't post super chats until we're done. And I may not have time. When you see this document, you'll realize why there's probably not going to be time for Q&A today. So let's just get into it, okay? So why am I doing this show? I already kind of said it. It's to warn people about this new glucose and dextrose fad. How it can feel good short term, which is like a drug effect, and it will be a disaster long-term because it slows detox, which I'm going to show you thoroughly. Now, there is a gentleman out there named Dr. Stevens who has been on several podcasts. He's charging $1,000 to work with him so that he can tell you how much sugar powder you should eat. And when I say sugar powder, I mean glucose or dextrose. They are the same molecule. I'm going to go over that. Okay. The thing that should have thrown up everybody's red flags about this approach was the claim of a 100% success rate with over 1,500 clients. Well, we've already confirmed with some of the people who have worked with him that the success rate is not 100%. Failures abound. And just if you see any, I don't claim a 100% success rate. There are all sorts of reasons people may not do well on the program. Some of them might be out there eating eggs, for example, thinking they're detoxing vitamin A while eating eggs and yet never posting any actual blood vitamin A results. It's an interesting crowd out there. Anyway, huge red flag. Like if somebody's living in a moldy house and they don't get better on my program, well, I kind of told them if you don't fix your moldy house, you're not going to get better on any program. So I would not claim them as a success. People who claim 99% success rates, which I saw a doctor do in my naturopathic medical school clinic, or 100% success rates are simply ignoring and denying their failures. That's why I don't say I have a 100% success rate. It's shysterism. Okay, so now, also the protocol, this glucose dextrose protocol is limited to 6 months. Why? Why is it limited? Do bad things happen along the way? Do we want the people to exit the process before the bad things show up so we're not blamed for the bad things? You have to ask, and then does this permanently fix the problems? Or after the 6 months is up, if people even get that far, because a lot of people are abandoning the process before they get anywhere near 6 months. Do the problems come back? 6 months after the 6 months, do the problems come back? Where are all the testimonials? If there are 1,500 plus people who have done this protocol with a 100% success rate, why is it so difficult to find testimonials on the internet? It's really hard. Like people had to go and search for these testimonials. Like they had to find the people and email them directly. And they were not all 100% success rate. So that's kind of weird, isn't it? And now I want to get into, let me open up something here real quick. So let me show you this. Let me share my tab. Okay, Joe, you can show this. So this is Dr. Stevens' free ebook, Glucose 101, The Brain Dysfunction Reclamation and Recovery Handbook. I want to read you one. As my dad taught me, great saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So I'm going to read you a quote from the introduction. Let me find it. This is a short book intended to provide you with information on the growing understanding of the role of glucose in brain function. An important part of this information is the role of glucose in treating brain dysfunction and a variety of mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual problems and diseases. So sugar is going to fix your spiritual issues. He says all of this is from this chapter. I got about 20 pages into this book before I stopped because I had to, where he was saying all these things are connected: your mental, your physical, emotional, and spiritual. And that's fine. And then he was saying, and all these problems are related to a lack of glucose. So all you needed to do all these times to fix your physical and mental and emotional and spiritual problems was just shovel more corn sugar in your mouth. Gosh, guys, why do vitamin A detox? You can just shovel sugar in your pie hole. Really? Okay? So, to say I'm not sold on this would be an understatement. Okay, Joe, you can take that off. Okay. Now, how long has glucose and dextrose been around? been around a long time, right? Long time. Why has no one figured out that glucose fixes all your problems until now? Or has it been a fad before, which I'll show you, and it fell off before because it didn't work? Just like methylene blue, Toluminati, I think Toluminati888 on Twitter has said, oh, we tried methylene blue as a nootropic 10 years ago, and we quit it because there were too many side effects. And people forget very quickly, and now there's a methylene blue fad around, which is going to end with people hurting themselves and wondering, how did I believe this? I took a toxic fluorescent dye, and it accumulated in my system, and it caused me more problems. These fads have been around before. These are not new. There is nothing new under the sun. All these powders have been shoveled down people's throats before. It didn't work then, and it's not going to work now. It's probably going to work even less now for a shorter time because people are more toxic and more deficient. So let me get into this. What is glucose and or dextrose? First of all, they are the same thing. It is corn sugar powder. It is corn sugar. Are we going backwards here? Are we actually thinking now that corn sugar is going to save our health? Half of table sugar. Oh, the answer was always just take the fructose out of table sugar and it's now going to save everyone. Give me a break. Let me show you this article. Just so you know. Joe, there it is. Dextrose versus glucose. Are these sugars equal? Two common terms, glucose and dextrose, are actually chemically identical. So I'm going to talk about glucose. Okay? Glucose is known as dextrose or D-glucose, according to the National Center of Biotechnology Information. Regardless of the terminology, it's a single unit of sugar known as a monosaccharide. There's no difference between glucose, dextrose, and D-glucose. They're simply different terms for the same monosaccharide and all have the exact same chemical composition. So I'm going to stop using the term dextrose unless it comes up. Glucose and dextrose powder are the same thing. Okay? Now, it is as processed a food as it gets. Come on. How can all these people out there, these health nuts, and people who are getting it, go, oh yeah, we don't want to eat processed foods, and then all of a sudden they're gobbling up corn sugar? Like, I just don't. What happened? What happened, people? Next, eating pure macros, pure energy compounds, pure carbs, pure protein, pure fats. The body must use nutrients stored already inside of it. So imagine these isolated macros are coming in. You need to use nutrients to process them. You must use your own nutrients that are already in there to process them because they didn't come in with anything like food does. So what does this do? It's an overall drain on your system's nutrients. It will deplete you in nutrients. The more of it you take, the faster you deplete nutrients. Weird thing that's been coming up with people, love your liver people, and others who are doing a low vitamin A diet. They start taking all this glucose and they go, wow, I can tolerate a lot more zinc now because it's depleting your zinc. Duh. It's depleting everything. Okay. Now think about this 6-month limit on the protocol. 6 months would be a long time to deplete your nutrients with spoonfuls of sugar 3 to 4 times a day. So limiting to 6 months would be one way to avoid this guaranteed nutrient depletion of the system. Now, one little positive about glucose powder is that at least there's zero toxic vitamin A and zero toxic copper in it. Okay, so there's less toxins in it, but it's draining everything else. Okay, there we got that. So see, I'm trying to show both sides. At least there's one positive to it. Now, next thing. What is the whole point of taking glucose or dextrose? Oh no, I closed it. Sorry, Joe. Let me fix it. I turned off my share. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So now we're on. What do we know about dextrose? Okay. Let's go down here. People with diabetes should avoid eating dextrose because it leads to a rapid increase in blood sugar, which they mean blood glucose, which can cause several complications. We're going to talk a bit about diabetes in this. Diabetes is a disease of hyperglycemia, high blood glucose. Why doesn't getting diabetes fix all your health problems if you've got high glucose in your blood now? And I'm going to tell you, if you took glucose and your blood sugars got more stable, this is a short-term drug effect. Seriously, people, if glucose fixed diabetes, taking sugar powder fixed diabetes, don't you think we would have figured it out by now? You got a honeymoon effect, a slowing down detox effect. We'll go over all of this. Oh, eating dextrose causes your blood sugar level to rise if you have kidney disease. Excessive consumption of dextrose and other sugars can cause a fatty buildup that leads to liver disease. This is WebMD. Okay. So now let's start going into the stuff. Now, first of all, Joe, you may want to pull up episode 71 or 53. So if you do not know anything about toxic bile theory, you need to go watch my live streams number 71 and number 53. Okay, if you don't understand toxic bile theory and you're trying to comment here, well, first of all, if you're in love with sugar and you just want to eat it, you're going to find reasons to eat it. Don't bother arguing here. You're a sugar addict. Go eat your sugar. I don't care. We're going to go over the addictive qualities of sugar too. But the first thing you want to know in the whole toxic bile theory thing is glucose is an antioxidant. Okay, let me open this one. Oh my gosh, I got to stop closing that. Okay, let's look here. Glucose as a major antioxidant. Major. And then what do they say? When, what for, and why it fails. That's not a good start. This is a really bad start, actually. What if we go down? Let me find it real quick. What's the line? Okay, so this is the part I want those of you who are obsessed with glucose as an energy source. And that's all you can think of it as. I want you to understand, I got this quote here just for you. The role of glucose as a fundamental source of reducing equivalence. Oops, wait, why did that? Oh, I guess I just can't go that big. Okay. The role of glucose as a fundamental source of reducing equivalence to antioxidant intracellular machinery, they meant to put is here, is very often underestimated or ignored due to its reputation of primary source of energy, as a primary source of energy. So, they're saying everybody focuses on the energy part of it, and people are ignoring the antioxidant part of it. We are not going to ignore the antioxidant part of it because your main detox systems are oxidative. Antioxidants, plant antioxidants. Where do we get glucose from? Oh, a plant. A plant antioxidant will slow down your detox. The biggest enzyme of this is ALDH, aldehyde dehydrogenase. Funny thing, glucose is going to turn into aldehydes. And glucose is an antioxidant, which slows down aldehyde dehydrogenase, your detox system. Wow, this is going to get ugly real quick. So if you want to focus on the energy part, go ahead. But if you ignore this, they're warning, don't ignore this because it's kind of important. Okay. So, and now let's go over, yeah, we got that. Now I want to go over, let's just go over how similar, there it is. Let's just go over how similar glucose and fructose are. Okay, there we go, Joe. So, everybody talks about, well, fructose is bad. Glucose is good. Fructose is bad. Glucose is good. Okay, well, table sugar's half glucose. How many people is table sugar fixing? Then they'll go, oh, but it's all the fructose, bro. Okay. I mean, these are, look at these molecules. Okay. You really think this little part here is going to change all of it? But let's keep going into this. Now, let's go here. I did it again. I'm going to have to figure this out. Where was it? Oh, I'll just do it. There we go. Okay, there we go. So, I got to stop closing windows. So, I just want y'all to make sure when you're kvetching over glucose and fructose. Fructose can turn back and forth into glucose. You see these arrows? You see these arrows? This means it's reversible. Fructose can turn into glucose. Glucose can turn into fructose, back and forth. See how you remember how similar they looked? And then we go glucose into glucose 6-phosphate, fructose 6-phosphate, fructose 1,6-diphosphate, and then G3. Just it's going back and forth. Do you see how it's going back and forth from fructose to glucose all over the place? The research on fructose looks worse. Okay. Just wait until we get into the glucose stuff, though. Now, here's a fun little thing. So we got glucose could turn into fructose, and then down here, oh, it turns into glycolaldehyde, and it turns into glyoxaldehyde. Huh. So taking glucose can turn into aldehydes. We'll go over that more. So now, why does eating sugar feel good? Right? Because isn't that why people are taking it? They're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better spooning spoonfuls of sugar into water and drinking it all day. Okay. Well, it feels good because it's a drug, it's addictive, it stimulates opioid receptors, and some of it even converts into alcohol in your system. Wow. Camera went out, I guess. Show. There we go. I should be back. Pardon my French. Joe, are we back? Yes. Okay, great. Somehow it hid me on the stream. I don't know. Okay, maybe if you're loving this sugar powder, it is quite possible that in the past you may have been a sugar addict. And what you were just given by this information, this fad, was a reason to indulge your sugar addiction. Maybe you're a closeted sugar addict. It doesn't really matter. Sugar addicts will find any way to eat their sugar. Those of you out there who have gotten over it, you know this. Okay, next. Comfort foods. For those of you who understand toxic bile theory, comfort foods, one of the biggest things with comfort foods is sugar. So let's say, knowing what we know in toxic bile theory, stress causes a bile dump. That bile, toxic bile, leaks into your system and you don't feel good. Your body says, hey, let's go eat some sugar because, as I'm going to show you, sugar slows down ALDH. Slowing down ALDH slows bile dumping, and you feel better because you're dumping less bile and leaking less bile into your blood. Okay, so this is the first example. Why would you like sugar? Because it made you feel better. It's a drug-like effect. So we talked about the alcohol. Let's go into this one. Sugar addiction. Is it real? Here we go. Sugar addiction. Is it real? A narrative review. In animal studies, sugar has been found to produce more symptoms than is required to be considered an addictive substance. Animal data has shown significant overlap between the consumption of added sugars and drug-like effects, including binging, craving, tolerance. So you need more over time. Wait, that sounds like the protocol. Withdrawals when it goes away. Oh, I stopped my glucose powder. Now I feel bad. Cross-sensitization, cross-tolerance, cross-dependence, reward, and opioid effects. No, go ahead, take your sugar powder. Go ahead. I'm sure it won't end badly. Sugar addiction seems to be dependence to the natural endogenous, made from within the body, opioids that get released upon sugar intake. Well, that would make you feel better. I mean, isn't that why we give opioids as a short-term thing to make people feel better? In both animals and humans, the evidence in the literature shows substantial parallels and overlap between drugs of abuse and sugar from the standpoint of brain neurochemistry as well as behavior. Yep, that's it for that one. So, yeah, you're addicted. And then let's just go into opioids, since we're talking about opioids. The relationship between opioid and sugar intake, review of evidence and clinical applications. Opioid use, acute and chronic, is also associated with weight gain, glycemic dysregulation, and dental pathology. The literature supporting the connection between opiate use and development of preference for sweet tastes is reviewed. Poison begets poison is the saying. The more poisons you take in, the more poisons you want. Opiate use makes you want more sugar. Shocking connection. And further association with dental pathology. Further association, that means it gets worse. Dental pathology, weight gain, and loss of glycemic control are considered. We discussed the impact of sweet taste on the endogenous opioid system, as well as clinical implications for analgesia, pain relief, and treating the opiate-dependent patient. Okay? So, you're a sugar junkie. If you insist on this stuff, you're medicating yourself with your own opioids and your own alcohol. Endogenous opioids. And let's go into this last one here. Impact of sugar on the body, brain, and behavior. Sugar is highly palatable. It tastes good and rewarding, both in its taste and nutritive input. Rewarding. Excessive sugar consumption, however, may trigger neuroadaptations in the reward system that decouple eating behavior from caloric needs and leads to compulsive overeating. You know that drinking sugar, whether it's soda or glucose powder in water or whatever, it's been shown to not trigger your satiety mechanisms. So you are able to eat more food, more calories than you normally would because the sugar doesn't register when you drink it. This is why the easiest way to lose weight is to stop drinking calories. It's to stop drinking sugar, because you eat more calories in a day when you drink sugar because the sugar doesn't fill you up at all. This is why babies can breastfeed so often in a day, and they're drinking this high sugar breast milk, and they drink it, their stomach gets full, so they get the trigger from their stomach being full to say stop eating, but then the sugar goes through them so quick that then they want to eat again. This is what high sugar does. Babies show it, adults show it. So now, let's go into one of the benefits that people have been talking about. They say, sugar is helping me poop. Well, we've seen multiple people say it helped them poop for a little bit, and then they stopped pooping as well. Let me explain that. So, what is sugar in terms of helping people poop? It's an osmotic laxative. It means it pulls water to it. It pulls water into your bowels. And then you poop because your body goes, I got all this water and this poop here. Let's get rid of it. Has this been shown? Hey, let's look at this article. Sugar helps you poop. Who knew? Actually, Kelsey did. She's the one who told me about this. So I'm not going to go into this article. Sugar helps you poop. Who knew? Right? Okay, they're going to try to find anything they can to sell you on sugar. Let's do another one. Let's do a side effect of what happens when you take too much of an osmotic laxative. Oh, you get diarrhea. Okay, what's a side effect of too much dextrose? Diarrhea. You're taking a laxative. When you take spoonfuls of sugar and you say you poop better and isn't this a good thing, you're taking a laxative that has other effects in your system. And what people are saying is the increased pooping effect slows down after a while because you stop making as much bile, which is the true the healthy driver of your poop is bile in your intestines. Now, so you understand the basic mechanism of this laxative thing. This is the exact same mechanism as magnesium and vitamin C, which we're going to go into also during this. These things, sugar, glucose, vitamin C, and magnesium, if you put them in your gut, they go into your gut, they draw water to them, and then your body says, I want to poop out all the poop and the water. So it triggers you to poop. Now, I will put it this way. We don't use ascorbic acid or vitamin C on the program, and we don't use glucose powder on the program. I do want to be clear on this. If you're doing glucose dextrose powder, don't say you're doing the Love Your Liver program unless you're doing it to shut down detox on purpose because you did something you shouldn't have, or for whatever reason, you're dumping too much bile. It's the only thing we're going to talk about using dextrose or glucose for in my program is to shut down detox, because that's what it does. Okay? If you decide to do that, that's on you, but don't say you're doing my program. So now, yeah, we've already seen people. One guy was just saying he started taking dextrose. He was pooping 5 times a day. Normally he pooped 3. He started taking dextrose. He poops 5 times a day. And after I don't know how many weeks of it, now he's down to 1. He's pooping less. He had the honeymoon phase of the laxative effect. And then over time, it slowed down his ALDH. It slowed down his bile. I'm going to go over all this. So now let's go into sugar, glucose specifically turning into aldehydes in your body. Okay, let me close some of these windows. Okay, here we go. How many aldehydes does sugar turn into in your system? At least 4. Endogenous, made from within the body. Ethanol, alcohol, production in health and disease. Ethanol, alcohol, is a major microbial, your gut biome metabolite, made by the gut biome that is produced in the intestine of nearly all individuals. However, elevated ethanol production is associated with pathological conditions such as metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease, fatty liver disease, and autobrewery syndrome, where people are making enough alcohol in their gut to get drunk. Oh, a candida thing. What feeds candida? Oh, sugar. How do we make alcohol? We ferment sugars, in which the liver's capacity to metabolize ethanol is surpassed. So they're making so much alcohol, their liver can't deal with it. And they get drunk. They're making themselves drunk. Okay? This comes about from sugar. So if your gut biome turns sugar into ethanol, ethanol turns into acetaldehyde, which is what gives you your hangover, which is what gives you your, this is what causes alcohol poisoning. Acetaldehyde is what causes alcohol poisoning and could kill you. Okay, so you can drink the alcohol itself, or you could just eat tons of sugar and feed candida and change your gut biome by feeding it things that, feeding it sugar. So the things that love sugar are going to grow more. Did we not learn anything from the candida years that eating sugar is not good? We conclude by discussing approaches to target excessive ethanol by gut bacteria, excessive ethanol production by gut bacteria. Okay, so your gut is making alcohol, which turns into acetaldehyde. You feed it more, you're going to make more. Okay, let's go into the next one. Deleterious, that's bad. Deleterious effects of reactive aldehydes and glycated, that means sugars attached to them, proteins on macrophage, those are your white blood cells, proteasomal function, possible links between diabetes and atherosclerosis. Bad effects of reactive aldehydes. So let's go into, where did these come from? People with diabetes, hyperglycemia, which didn't make them better, experience chronic hyperglycemia and are at a high risk of developing atherosclerosis and microvascular disease. Reactions of glucose or aldehydes derived from glucose. Examples being methylglyoxaldehyde, glyoxaldehyde, or glycolaldehyde with those proteins result in glycation, sugar getting stuck to them, that ultimately yield advanced glycation end products, AGE or AGEs with a little s. AGE are present at elevated levels in plasma and atherosclerotic lesions from people with diabetes, and previous cell studies in vitro have postulated that the presence of these materials is deleterious, bad for cell function. So it's the glucose, reactions of glucose or aldehydes derived from glucose with proteins creates the AGEs that are associated with diabetes. Go ahead and shovel the sugar powder down, folks. Go ahead. I'm sure it'll end fine. So we got at least four aldehydes that are made from glucose. So the more glucose you eat, the more aldehydes you're going to make. So the more aldehydes you make, the more you use up your ALDH to process them. And the more toxic you become, the slower your detox gets. And then you start eventually, when I say you make less bile, the bile that's supposed to be going the right way down your bile ducts and into your intestines, it starts going the wrong way and it goes back into your bloodstream. It's called cholestasis. This is what I show in like all the disease states on the live stream, like all the time. Okay. So, and more aldehydes equals more AGEs, the advanced glycation end products. Like, let's go into glycation, that problem, the AGEs, and sleep quality. Because somebody in the chat last week said that they started doing glucose and their sleep apnea went away, like immediately. I'm going to tell you that is the biggest honeymoon effect I've ever seen, because nobody is doing sugar and fixing their sleep apnea for any length of time. That's going to end. It's probably going to end badly. Let me make this a little bigger if I can. There we go. Glycative stress. Glycative stress is a pathophysiological condition attributed to the excessive production of reducing sugars or swallowing them, lipids, and diverse alcohol-derived aldehydes. Well, we just saw that sugar can be made into alcohol in your system, and that turns into aldehydes. Okay. The aldehyde reacts with biological materials to form carbonyl protein and or AGEs. AGEs/RAGE signaling is stimulated, and a variety of changes occur which are causes of diseases or regressive changes related to aging. Causes of glycative stress are the following: blood glucose spikes. How better to cause that other than taking spoonfuls of glucose? Lipid abnormalities, such as high triglyceride level. This is related to vitamin A toxicity. I've shown that. The more vitamin A you take in, the more your triglycerides. And high LDL cholesterol level. Just so you know, Grant Genereux has suggested that high LDL is one potential marker of vitamin A toxicity. It's not a great one, so is high triglycerides. Both of these things are markers of vitamin A toxicity. Oh, wait, you're trying to detox vitamin A and you're going to shovel glucose into your pie hole? Oh, that will end well, because they're saying glycative stress caused by lipid abnormalities, which is vitamin A toxicity, and you're trying to combine, we already know you're vitamin A toxic, and now you're going to shovel in glucose. Excessive alcohol consumption turns into aldehydes. It's also made by glucose in your system. A material common in these three causes is aldehyde. There are some people who do not have an abnormal fasting blood glucose level, but have a blood glucose level of 160 milligrams per deciliter or higher after meals, which is referred to as a blood glucose spike. They don't normally have a high blood glucose level, but they spike after food. Recent research has clarified that this postprandial, that's after a meal, hyperglycemia, high blood glucose, induces the rapid progression of arteriosclerosis, that's blood vessel disease, heart disease, and a diverse variety of physical damage. The glucose spike evokes an aldehyde spark. The glucose spike evokes an aldehyde spark. Various types of aldehyde are simultaneously formed with a chain reaction. Glyceraldehyde, glycolaldehyde, acetaldehyde, deoxyglucosone, I haven't even heard of that one, glyoxaldehyde, methylglyoxaldehyde, and malondialdehyde are representative aldehydes. Well, let me just show you that hyperglycemia, high blood glucose, later will show that it's also associated with higher malondialdehyde, the fatty aldehyde. The aldehyde group is a highly reactive compound, and enzymes for reactions are not necessary. Highly reactive compound. Processes of reactions are regulated by substrate concentration, so the more it's like dose dependent, the more you have, the more you're going to make. Temperature, higher temperatures, chemical reactions go faster at higher temperatures, and time. Sugars in glucose spikes are usually saccharides with a cyclical form like a hexose, which glucose and fructose are both hexoses. Okay? I believe that's all in this one. Yep. Okay. Aldehyde spark every time you take that drink. So now let's get into how slowing down ALDH. We're just going to look at some research where if you slow ALDH, it causes health problems. Okay? Slowing down ALDH causes health problems. So let's go into this one. Diabetes. Hyperglycemia impairs the aldehyde detoxifying capacity of the retina. Diabetes associated with eye problems. Diabetes inhibits the aldehyde detoxifying capacity. Diabetes is associated with hyperglycemia. Are you putting it together yet? These findings suggest that downregulation of aldehyde dehydrogenase and AKR enzymes, particularly ALDH1A1, may contribute to ALE accumulation in the diabetic retina. Let's just go over ALE for you guys. Where was it? Advanced lipoxidation end products, as opposed to ages. So fats can also oxidize and get stuck on proteins, it sounds like. So we've got that. So diabetes associated with slower ALDH, diabetes associated with high blood glucose, diabetes associated with eye problems. We talk about vitamin A connecting to eye problems, vitamin A toxicity. Vitamin A has an aldehyde form that I actually think is probably the worst of them all, the one that gets stuck in the body the most. Retinaldehyde causing eye problems because ALDH is slowed down. That'd be weird. If you are taking glucose powder while you're trying to detox vitamin A, you are shooting yourself in the foot. You are slowing down the entire detox process. Okay, let's go to the next one. Inhibition of aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 by oxidative stress is associated with cardiac dysfunction in diabetic rats. So we've got diabetic rats, hyperglycemic. They inhibited ALDH. It's associated with heart problems. Left ventricular dysfunction is a common comorbidity. That's a disease with other diseases in diabetic patients. Although the molecular mechanisms underlying this cardiomyopathic feature, that's heart muscle pathology, sickness, are not completely understood. Aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 has been considered a key cardioprotective enzyme. ALDH protects your heart? Imagine that. Susceptible to oxidative inactivation. We hypothesized that hyperglycemia-induced oxidative stress would influence ALDH2 activity, and ALDH2 inhibition would lead to cardiac functional alterations in diabetic rats. Diabetes was induced by intraperitoneal injection of 60 milligrams per kilogram streptozotocin. Kelsey has informed me that streptozotocin is basically a direct relative of ivermectin. So they're injecting the rats with a relative of ivermectin to induce diabetes. So we're talking about the mitochondrial membrane potential for those of you who obsess over mitochondria. That's this little sign here, mitochondrial membrane potential. Myocardial heart muscle malondialdehyde, bad content, and reactive oxygen species were significantly higher in diabetic rats than in controls. Hyperglycemia slows ALDH. If your ALDH doesn't run, you build up malondialdehyde and other aldehydes. Okay? Diabetic rats exhibited significant reduction in left ventricular ejection fraction and fractional shortening, accompanied by decreases in ALDH2 activity and expression. Mitochondrial membrane potential was decreased greatly with hyperglycemia treatment. And high glucose combined with ALDH2 inhibition with daidzen, this is the soy polyphenol, phytoestrogen. Phytoestrogens are polyphenols, which we don't want to eat either because they slow ALDH. So they combined ALDH inhibitor, another ALDH inhibitor, further decreased the mitochondrial membrane potential. That's not good. The ALDH2 activity can be regulated by oxidative stress in the diabetic rat heart. ALDH2 inhibition may be associated with left ventricular reduced contractility, and mitochondrial impairment aggravated by ALDH2 inhibition might reflect underlying mechanism which causes cardiac dysfunction in diabetic rats. Okay, so ALDH2 that's slower causes problems. Let's keep going. The role of aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 in cardiovascular disease. Aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 is a mitochondrial enzyme involved in the detoxification of alcohol-derived acetaldehyde and endogenous made from within the body aldehydes, like if you ate glucose. The inactivating ALDH2 RS671 polymorphism, so they're saying these people have slow ALDH genetically. Okay? This is a genetic issue. Present in up to 8% of the global population and up to 50% of East Asian population, is associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular conditions such as coronary artery disease, alcohol-induced cardiac dysfunction, pulmonary arterial hypertension, heart failure, and drug-induced cardiotoxicity, heart toxicity from drugs. This is just the genetic part. So imagine if you start shoveling sugar down there, you start shoveling antioxidants down there, you start shoveling polyphenols down there. What happens? Bad stuff happens. Let me see if there's anything else. So what I'm showing you is that ALDH, slowing ALDH is associated with diseases. Oh, wait, didn't want to do that. Now let's go into what happens if they make ALDH faster. What are we going to see then? Activation of aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 ameliorates or makes better, look at this part, glucolipotoxicity. Sugars bound to fat that are toxic of pancreatic beta cells, the pancreas as being related to the good old diabetes, the thing that has to deal with all the glucose powder being shoveled down. Chronic hyperglycemia and hyperlipidemia hamper beta cell function. I'm going to say that these are both, I'm going to say chronic hyperglycemia and chronic hyperlipidemia are caused by vitamin A toxicity, which damages beta cell function, leading to glucolipotoxicity. Mitochondrial aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 detoxifies reactive aldehydes such as methyl glyoxal and 4-hydroxynonenal. This is another fatty aldehyde, non-aldehyde. Whenever you see Al at the end, you just add dehyde, aldehyde, derived from glucose and lipids respectively. So they gave an ALDH activator. They gave ALDA1. Where is it? I saw it there, but I wanted to see if they said anything better about it. We found that ALDA1, this is an aldehyde dehydrogenase activator. It makes it go faster. What happened? In conclusion, we reported the activator of ALDH2 not only enhanced GSIS, I'll look that up in a sec, but also ameliorated or made better, made less, the glucolipotoxicity of beta cells by reducing both the mitochondrial and intracellular reactive oxygen species levels, thereby improving mitochondrial function, restoring beta cell function, and protecting beta cells from apoptosis and death. Speeding up ALDH, restored beta cell function, and protected them from apoptosis and death. There are two people out there. There is a child and an adult. They were on Grant's forum claiming, they claimed this, that they cured their type 1 diabetes with a low vitamin A diet. Did they take sugar powder? No. There was lots of beef and rice. Now I want to warn you about rice because one of the gentlemen who did fix his problem, so they are not insulin dependent anymore. They claimed it. One of the gentlemen said he may have caused himself problems from the arsenic in rice. He wasn't sure if it was a B1 deficiency from the rice or if it was a arsenic problem from all the rice. So yes, you can fix one problem while you cause another. So you need to be careful with your rice. You need to prepare it properly or buy the Lotus Foods rice, which has the lowest arsenic in it. If you're going to do rice, I don't do rice. And you may see a reason why you want to find something other than rice later. But you can fix your pancreas. But note that sugar powder has no place in that. Okay. Aldehydes. Do aldehydes make health problems worse? I'm going to connect all this. Here we go. Reactive aldehydes, an initial path to develop precision medicine for pain control. So let's say somebody's shoveling down sugar powder and their pain gets worse over time once they pass the honeymoon phase. We discuss how reactive aldehyde production in the body can trigger pain and how the enzyme mitochondrial aldehyde dehydrogenase 2 regulates inflammatory pain by reactive aldehyde metabolism. We also comment about the possible clinical impact caused by the inefficiency of reactive aldehyde metabolism for the 540 million people with an ALDH2 variant. So they are genetically slow on aldehyde processing and they have diseases. Okay. So there's that. You've probably all seen testimonials on the internet of people saying they stopped sugar and all sorts of problems went away. It's unreal that people are thinking that sugar is going to fix anything. It can band-aid it. It can cover it up. It's not fixing anything. Kelsey sent me this one. Inhibition of ferroptosis. This is iron-caused cell death. Inhibition of iron-caused cell death ameliorates photoreceptor degeneration in experimental diabetic mice. Okay. High glucose stimulated 661W cells and diabetic mice models were used for in vitro and in vivo, so that's in cells and in whole animals experiments respectively. They measured lipid peroxidation by measuring malondialdehyde. Our data showed that the levels of iron, reactive oxygen species, and malondialdehyde were enhanced. And GSH concentration, that's glutathione concentration, was reduced in high glucose induced 661W cells. Why didn't they just all get better? And diabetic retinas in the whole animals. Wait, so malondialdehyde was increased everywhere in the cells and in the cells and the whole animal. Trying to save you guys. You can argue with me all you want. I'm just trying to help you. Now, moving on. So we've already been over ALDH is generally inhibited in high glucose situations. What does insulin do? Insulin takes glucose out of the circulation and puts it into cells. Okay? That would mean there's less glucose floating around. So what does insulin do to ALDH then? And what would that do to bile production? Does bile in the blood play a role in glycemic problems, hyperglycemia, hypoglycemia, blood sugar problems? Well, let's go into that. Bile acid metabolism and the pathogenesis of type 2 diabetes, the disease creation. Bile acid metabolism and the disease creation process of type 2 diabetes. Let's go find this. In the past 15 years, a growing body of evidence has shown that bile acid metabolism is altered in type 2 diabetes patients, and conversely, that manipulation of the bile acid pool can improve glycemic control in such patients. So let's say somebody manipulated ALDH to affect bile production, and they saw improvements for a short while. Are you following me? An early study in patients with uncontrolled type 2 diabetes reported an increase in the bile acid pool size and fecal bile acid excretion, which decreased upon insulin treatment. So affecting, so patients with uncontrolled type 2 diabetes had higher bile acids in their blood, and they were pooping out more bile. They're just making a ton of bile. It's going into their blood. It's causing their diabetes. Okay. They gave them insulin, which pulls glucose out of the blood and puts it into the tissues. And they saw that the bile dumping went down. So you can affect these things by affecting your glucose. Are you following me? It's not always going to go, because short-term studies don't equal long-term. Short-term doesn't equal long-term. This is how the pharma cartel works. They do things that seem to help short-term, and they're disasters long-term. Okay? This is the duration paradox. If you don't understand the duration paradox, it's that things that often look good in the short term in cell studies or just short-term in vitro studies, when we often look at them long-term, it's exactly the opposite, which will be like when we get to Ray Peat saying that glucose and fructose and sugar helps diabetes, which he said like 15 years ago. It didn't seem to work because Peters are getting diabetes now. So, and let's go to this next one. Fatty aldehyde dehydrogenase. So this is an aldehyde dehydrogenase for the fatty ones, like 4-hydroxynonenal and malondialdehyde, bad ones. The reason why you don't want to eat PUFAs is because PUFAs turn into malondialdehyde and 4-hydroxynonenaldehyde. So the potential role in oxidative stress protection and regulation of its gene expression by insulin. FALDH mRNA levels were four times lower in streptozotocin. This is the worst word. Streptozotocin, ivermectin relative, treated rats, suggesting that FALDH deregulation, slowing down of it, occurs in both hyperinsulinemic insulin-resistant state and hypoinsulinemic type 1 diabetes models. Moreover, insulin treatment increases ALDH activity in liver cells. Insulin treatment, getting the blood sugar down, increases FALDH activity in liver cells. Glucose is manipulating your ALDH. It's making you pump out a lot more insulin. You pump out too much insulin for too long to soak up all this glucose, and you become what? Insulin resistance. Insulin resistance leads to metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is prediabetes. You don't get away from the fact that you're having to pump out insulin to do all this, to try to keep your bile pumping. So now let's go into some real world examples of how sugar, glucose, affects bile production and bile dumping. Real world stuff. First, I want to go into I'm going to repeat on this. I'm going to hit on this again. What do people actually think glucose is fixing? Like, what is long-term root cause? Why is the protocol only 6 months? That's not long-term. But what is it actually fixing short-term? Well, the explanation is it's giving you gas. It's giving you fuel for your brain and other things. They're saying if you get enough fuel to your brain, everything else gets better. Oh, okay. Okay. So they're giving you gas for your car. Now, giving you extra gas for your car, does that fix why the car is broken? No. What if you're not getting glucose into places because you're lacking zinc, which goes with diabetic states, because you're lacking magnesium, because you're lacking potassium, because you've got a selenium deficiency, because you've got a molybdenum deficiency? What if it's because you're vitamin A toxic, which has been shown to cause diabetes? What if you're copper toxic, which has been shown to be associated with diabetes? What if it's the toxicities that are causing your blood sugar problems, and it's not getting into, you have it floating around your blood in high amounts, but it's not getting into your cells, and then you shove a bunch of sugar powder in your mouth and you overpower that osmotically and you feel better, but you are kicking the can down the road. You're going to break the system. And this might be why it's a 6-month program. What we are trying to do here is we are trying to the story of teaching a man to fish. Taking a bunch of glucose powder would be me, or well, I won't do this, but Dr. Stevens is giving you a fish. Does this teach you how to fish? No. What do you need the next day? You need to have the fish again. You become dependent on it. And you shovel more sugar powder down your throat. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to fix the root causes of your inability to process and utilize sugars properly, like by fixing your ALDH, by fixing your toxicities, by fixing your deficiencies. The root cause of your glucose problems is not a lack of corn sugar. So let's go into these examples further. Most of you have probably had, at least in your past, you've had some experience with drinking alcohol. How many of you have heard the concept that sugary alcoholic drinks cause worse hangovers versus drinking something cleaner like just straight spirits or like a vodka and soda water, stuff without sugar? Most of you have probably heard that. And if you haven't, it's a normal thing out there. Everybody knows that the more sugary drinks you drink, the worse your hangover is going to be. Okay, why would that be? Well, let's just say sugar inhibits ALDH. And if you inhibit ALDH, you make more acetaldehyde. If you make more acetaldehyde and you can't process it, you get a worse hangover. If you drink liquors, straight liquors, or liquors with like like club soda or whatever, and you don't drink all the sugar, you have less hangover because you don't inhibit your ALDH so much. Does that make sense? There's one example. Now let's go into the meat sweats. Let me find that one. So I forgot to put this one in there. But let's go into the meat sweats. What is the meat sweats? For those of you who don't know, let's say you go to the Brazilian steakhouse, which I love, or you go somewhere and you just eat tons of meat. Tons of meat. And that's pretty much all you eat. You don't eat any carbs, so there's no glucose source really. And then later, what happens? You get the meat sweats. You get all hot and you start sweating and you kind of feel gross for a while. What happens with that? Well, one of the things we're going to go over here, we got the insulin index. And this was something Will Neville brought to my attention. I want to give him credit for that. The insulin index, and yes, this is Wikipedia. This is a legit topic. It was just the thing I found today to show you. If you throw out everything I say because I used a Wikipedia link, just go somewhere else anyway. Nobody wants you here. The insulin index can be more useful than either the glycemic index or the glycemic load because certain foods, for example, lean meats and proteins, cause an insulin response despite there being no carbohydrates present. So if we come down here and we look, let's just go look at beef. The insulin index is 51 plus or minus 16. So beef stimulates an insulin dump. Okay, but there's not that many carbs in it, right? So that was the insulin index, right? Yeah, insulin score. 51. Where was the, let's go and look at some of these. Well, look at this. That's not that far off from brown rice and whole grain bread, but there's no carbs in it. Look at white pasta and brown pasta are both at 40. So beef stimulates more insulin release than these. So what does that mean? Okay, so you eat beef. Let's say you just eat all beef. Or if it was me at a Brazilian steakhouse, I would eat all lamb. Some guys already who went with me know that now. I love the lamb there. I love lamb. I never get enough of it. So they dump a bunch of insulin. They lower their blood glucose drastically because they didn't take in any glucose, but they dumped a bunch of insulin. The insulin drops their glucose. Their ALDH speeds up. What does that cause? A bile dump. What is one of the major symptoms that can happen if you dump enough bile? Fevers. Meat sweats. Are you following? So let's go into the next one. The keto flu. People know that when they get into the keto diet, often they may have what they call the keto flu, which is so once you've gone into ketosis long enough, a day, two maybe or something like that. I don't know. I never made the mistake of going keto. But they're not eating hardly any carbs. And they're doing, well, they're not eating a lot of carbs, so that's going to be not a lot of insulin dumping. They're doing high fat, which doesn't trigger a lot of insulin. But they go long enough and their blood sugar drops because they're not putting it in. Their blood sugar drops. They get symptoms because their insulin, they're dumping it. Their blood sugar is dropping. Their ALDH speeds up and they dump more bile and then they get the flu. Okay, are you following me here? This is all connected. Everybody wants to look at glucose as just an energy thing. Don't do that. Don't make that mistake. So now some of you in the past have had hypoglycemia with no symptoms, right? Or you go to the doctor and you say, I have all these symptoms of hypoglycemia. And they say, well, your blood sugar's fine. Or you have people who are hypoglycemic with no symptoms. And the same things happen with hyperglycemia. People can have really, really high blood sugar and no symptoms. Or they can have really, really high blood sugar and all sorts of symptoms. What is going on? Is it the glucose then? Or is it the bile? Oh. Because the level of the sugar is not dictating the symptoms necessarily. We've all seen this. We all have friends who are like, oh, I'm getting like my low blood sugar symptoms. And then they go to the doctor and their blood sugar's fine. Well, what happened? What were their symptoms from then? You see? So there's something else causing their symptoms. Probably bile. I already talked about this. Why did if glucose fixes everything, why doesn't hyperglycemia fix anything? Or does it? Could hyperglycemia in the body be a response a protective response by the body to slow down bile. We're going to get into that. Now let's go into this. So let's do one more example of dextrose slowing down bile production. Effects of intravenous dextrose, so IV dextrose, on preventing postoperative nausea and vomiting. A systematic review and meta-analysis with trial sequential analysis. So they're giving IV sugar, dextrose, glucose, to prevent nausea after a surgery. Did it work? Our results reveal, back to toxic bile theory. What is nausea and vomiting? It's bile in your stomach. It's bile coming back up. It's cholestasis. It's bile in the wrong place. If you haven't seen my reflux episode, you should, because this is the same root thing, bile in the stomach. Reflux is bile in your stomach. So if you had bile in places it shouldn't be, and you put in a bunch of dextrose, glucose, to shut down bile production, then you could reduce nausea. They say here it didn't do anything to vomiting, but that may be too strong a response. Like there's too much bile and the dextrose wasn't strong enough. So they could get results with something, but not all of it. Compared with placebos, perioperative, this is around the operation, intravenous dextrose administration may decrease postoperative nausea, but not vomiting. So it only works so strongly. Let's keep going. Oh, I get to tell a story now. I've told this story before. My MSM story. Those of you who don't know, MSM is methyl sulfonyl methane. It's what some people call organic sulfur. Now, when you start going through the research on sulfur, you start to realize that it slows down ALDH quite strongly. Sulfur slows down your detox. Do not believe all the people out there saying that you need tons of sulfur to run your detox. You are not going to run out of any. There's no such thing as a sulfur deficiency. There's no such thing. Show me. And if you eat meat, you are getting enough sulfur to do whatever your body needs to do. Meat has sulfur in it. What are the things we don't eat that have a lot of sulfur in them? Well, we don't eat the allium vegetables, the garlic and onions. We don't eat the cruciferous vegetables generally, the broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. Dairy is a huge source of sulfur. Dairy is a huge source of sulfur. Egg whites are a huge source of sulfur. We don't do magnesium sulfate baths. So, sulfur slows down ALDH. So let me go over a story of mine where I had quite a honeymoon phase on MSM that ended badly. So I can relate that. This is like the old grizzled veteran telling you, "Oh, I've been there, I've done that." So I started talking to this guy who was saying that basically MSM fixed everything. Is this sounding familiar? Well, if in toxic bile theory, if toxic bile is related to all of your chronic conditions, then things that strongly affect bile flow could be connected to chronic conditions, whether for better or worse. You following me here? So he was saying organic MSM, sulfur, a byproduct of the wood making industry, would fix everything. Myself and Julie and my buddy started taking it. Oh, and the other thing that this guy told me, he said, if you start detoxing too hard from it, if you start feeling bad from it, the solution is to take more. It's so weird. It's so good for you that if you don't feel good from it, you just take more. I believe that God put me in that spot so I could learn this very valuable lesson. And this is what I'm trying to share with you guys before you make a mistake yourself. So the first about 9 days, I felt on top of the freaking world. I felt like, it must be like I was just giddy happy. And I'm talking to Julia, my buddy, and I'm just like, this is amazing. I feel so great. This is wonderful. Sound familiar? Any of you glucose folks? And I was going along, and then all of a sudden, I think maybe day 8, things started to kind of, because I was taking a lot. I was taking tablespoons of this stuff. Sound familiar? And I'm going along, and I'm listening to this guy, and he says, well, just take more, because he was consulting with me. And so if I start feeling bad, what does he say? Take more. Sounds like a drug effect to me. So I kept doing that. The last day I took this stuff, I took 10 tablespoons of MSM. And then everything fell apart. Absolutely. I had this pain in my leg. So what I did was like the mood, it was bad mood. I couldn't sleep. I had this pain in my right thigh where I actually atrophied in my right thigh over this time. Like my outer quad on my right leg actually specifically atrophied, the vastus lateralis. That specific muscle atrophied. It would burn if I walked it would burn so bad, like lactic acid burn, if I walked 50 feet to the bathroom. The worst pain, it sounds hilarious, but the worst pain was when I was trying to stand at the urinal. I don't know why that position hurt. That was the worst thing I could do. Like I was walking with my kids at one of these, it was an outdoor party, and I had to like stop and sit down to get the burning in my thigh to stop. So I started going, what is going on? After, I don't know, a month of this, I said, it's not going away. It didn't go away. It did not just fix itself. This is why I'm warning you. It doesn't just go away. So then I emailed Stephanie Seneff. Somebody told me, they said, I think you should talk to Stephanie Seneff. She knows a lot about sulfur stuff. So I emailed her, and she said, now Stephanie Seneff is very right on a couple of things. I disagree with her on many, many other things. She's now a board member of Weston Price. So yeah, we disagree on a lot now. But she also brought up the idea that glyphosate inhibits vitamin A detox. So she said over email, she said, it was very gracious of her to answer the email. I will be forever grateful that she did that for me, regardless of our disagreements elsewhere. She said, it sounds like you have hydrogen sulfide poisoning. And go look into that. That's all I needed. I went and I researched hydrogen sulfide poisoning. I actually found a story by a guy who lived above a landfill. Landfills put off a lot of hydrogen sulfide gas. That's that rotten egg smell. So yeah, landfills are pumping out hydrogen sulfide. He was living in an apartment that had been built on top of an old landfill. And this happens way more often than you know. And he specifically described this right thigh pain that would get worse from standing on it too long. And I was like, and I looked up all the other stuff about hydrogen sulfide, and I went, okay, this is it. So I actually antidoted it. If those of you who are in the Love Your Liver program, you know about B vitamins as antidotes. I looked up antidotes for hydrogen sulfide poisoning. Lo and behold, B12 is an antidote for hydrogen sulfide poisoning. So I did IVs I did intramuscular injections of B12 basically everywhere I possibly could. I got 2 IVs of B12, and it shut that stuff down about 90% within 2 days. I was peeing fruit punch color. I had so much B12 in my system right after the IV. Like it was purplish red fruit punch color. And the first day after the intramuscular injections, I was about 70% better. And then after the IV the second day, I was about 90% better. And then I finally got rid of it. And I think I'm still dealing with a little bit of the after effects. It doesn't all just go away. So if you mess yourself up with glucose, it doesn't just disappear. Okay? Just like trauma in your past, the time does not fix all trauma, right? But I want to show you that was MSM, which is thought to be so wonderful in the health community. Sulfur inhibits ALDH. Inhibiting ALDH causes bile problems. The bile tends to go backwards into your bloodstream, which is how these things could cause problems in my thigh and my insomnia in the brain and all that stuff. Okay? So That's a quick story of inhibiting ALDH causing a great honeymoon phase, like 8 days maybe, and then an absolute disaster. So other things can do this. Now let's go into the old vitamin C, because ascorbic acid, high dose. Some of you may have used this in the past. Some of you may have heard me say that ascorbic acid is actually like one of the strongest ALDH inhibitors you can take. It inhibits ADH, alcohol dehydrogenase, and ALDH, which is how you take high-dose vitamin C and you can see issues go away so quickly. You dose it up to bowel tolerance and then back off a little bit, and you can see allergies disappear. I used to take 8 grams a day to make my allergies go away. Did I have to do it every summer when the pollen came back around? Yes, I did, because it didn't fix anything. I just shut down my bile production. That's it. Made myself feel better for a while. Allergy season goes away. Oh, I can stop the vitamin C again. Next year, it's going to be probably worse, because back then I didn't know about vitamin A detox and I just got more vitamin A toxic, and then my allergies came back stronger. So let's go into, let me get rid of some of these windows. Let's go into something similar here. So I'm telling you that, oh wait, not that one, this one. Here we go. So I want you to look here, just like we did with glucose and fructose. There's not much of a difference here between glucose and ascorbic acid. And I'm telling you that I have the research showing that ascorbic acid strongly inhibits ALDH. And I'm telling you that taking spoonfuls of sugar powder, an antioxidant, will slow down your ALDH and slow down your detox. Look how similar these are. Okay. So then let's go into, since people are out there taking mega doses of, what did it say? This was an interesting thing that Dr. Stevens said. He said the highest dose he's ever taken anybody to was 33 tablespoons of glucose powder or dextrose powder. 33. It's a very interesting number. Those of you who are into the occult and numerology, 33 is a very interesting kind of signature number to put out there. Interesting. So then, you could just, 2 cups is, I believe, 32 tablespoons. So why not just say 2 cups instead of 33? So 33 tablespoons, that's a big dose. So let's remind ourselves that a tablespoon of ascorbic acid is probably around 4 grams. Okay? A tablespoon of ascorbic acid is about 4 grams of ascorbic acid. And remember how similar those structures were. So let's read about bowel tolerance method on vitamin C to make diseases disappear. Hey, it would be weird to inhibit ALDH and make a disease disappear for a while. Remember, Linus Pauling still died of prostate. He had prostate cancer. He started his high-dose vitamin C. He still died of prostate cancer. He did. Bowel tolerance method. In 1970, I discovered this. The sicker a patient was, the more ascorbic acid he would tolerate by mouth before diarrhea was produced. Osmotic laxative. At least 80% of adult patients will tolerate 10 to 15 grams of ascorbic acid fine crystals. Well, 10 to 15 grams, this is like 4 tablespoons, up to about 4 tablespoons of ascorbic acid fine crystals in 1/2 cup water in 4 divided doses. So they split it up into 4 doses. Sound weird. Wait, dosing 3 to 4 times a day? Getting into tablespoon doses? Causing better pooping or even loose bowels? Does this sound familiar? The astonishing finding was that almost all patients will absorb far greater amounts without having diarrhea when they are ill. Okay, let's go into toxic bile theory. When people are ill, do they have more bile in their blood? Yes. If you have more bile in your blood, do you need to shut it down harder to get relief? Yes. So when people get sick, they can push it higher to shut it down. They have to push it higher to shut it down to get the drug-like effect from the white powder stuff. This increased tolerance is somewhat proportional to the toxicity of the disease being treated. Tolerance is increased some by stress. Wait, so you mean stress like anxiety, stress, exercise, heat? Wait, do we talk about these dumping bile? Oh, so these things dump more bile so people can have to take more vitamin C to shut it down more. This is all just showing the toxic bile theory stuff is making sense. Admittedly, increasing the frequency of doses increases tolerance perhaps to half again as much. So the more times you take it during the day, the more you can take because you get less of the diarrhea and more of you still get the shutting down effect because it lasts hours. But the tolerance exceeding sometimes 200 grams per 24 hours was totally unexpected. 200 grams divided by 4 is 50. We're getting up into 50 tablespoons in a 24-hour period. 33 tablespoons, 50 tablespoons. So representative doses taken by patients titrating their ascorbic acid intake between the relief of most symptoms and the production of diarrhea were as follows. So they're talking about grams per hour. Look at it, 150 to 200 plus for mono, 150 to 200 plus for viral pneumonia. They need to shut it down. This is what they're doing. Supposedly infections. Okay. So you can shut this all down with vitamin C too. Vitamin C shuts down ALDH. It's an antioxidant. Glucose shuts down ALDH. It's an antioxidant. Their structures are amazingly similar. And for some reason, the doses in the tablespoons seem to be fairly similar. And they both cause diarrhea if you take too much of them. Are you seeing the similarities? Neither of them fix the toxicity problem, which I've shown that vitamin A toxicity is the cause of scurvy, the lack of vitamin C. That's another live stream that you could watch. Okay. Now, let's get into a crazy idea here. So your body can make glucose out of fat. It can make it out of protein. It can obviously make it out of starches and sugars. Okay. So there's no shortage of materials to make glucose in your body. And people will go, but your body needs glucose to live. Yes, that's fine. You need whatever amount you need to live, and you don't need to shovel it in on top of that. Your body will break down tissues to make glucose. Yes. But what if, here's where we're going to get crazy. What if the high blood glucose, the hyperglycemia, is an adaptive response that your body can use? It can raise your blood sugar to purposely slow down your ALDH, to purposely help you make less bile, to try to save your life. I want you to wrap your brain around this before I go into it. So think of it. You have a disease where, and oh, Joe, you're going to want to pull up the anaphylaxis episode and put that on the screen. So anaphylaxis and sepsis are totally related. You'll see it in the live stream that I did. They are massive, massive leaks of bile into the system. Okay. Massive leaks of bile. Like in the dogs that had anaphylaxis, on the ultrasound, they could actually see a hole, an actual hole in their gallbladder. Wait, what does the gallbladder hold? Bile. If you had a hole in your gallbladder, would you leak tons of bile out into the system? Yes. Would tons of bile would leaking bile cause sepsis and anaphylaxis, which look very similar in the live stream and go over. They were saying it's really hard to tell the difference between these things. Weird, because it's the same cause. That's probably why you have trouble telling the difference. So let's go wrap our brain around this one. Hyperglycemia in septic patients, an essential stress survival response in all, a robust marker for risk stratification in some, to be messed with in none. So, you know, medicine always, they see hyperglycemia and they want to slam it down. They want to give a bunch of insulin and bring it down. An essential stress survival response. I'm telling you that sepsis is bile in your blood, and the body is dumping tons of glucose into the blood to save your life by shutting down the bile dumping at the best way it possibly has. It's that your body is trying to save your life. Wait, let me find it. In stress situations, the body is thought to activate the central nervous system and neuroendocrine axes, which release hormones such as catecholamines, glucagon, and cortisol, which are known to stimulate hepatic glucose production and lead to hyperglycemia. So you're saying the body is purposely causing hyperglycemia. Why might that be? Stress hyperglycemia is primarily caused by hepatic gluconeogenesis, making new glucose, and glycogenolysis rather than by peripheral insulin resistance. They're not talking about diabetics here. They're talking about stress hyperglycemia, like you're dying. Further, hyperglycemia is thought to be at least partially physiologic and reasonable for the organism from a survival standpoint. So they're going to talk about glucose and all this. You need tons of energy while you're laying there dying. No, you need to stop dumping bile into the system so your body raises the blood sugar. It slows down ALDH and it slows down bile. Okay. So don't make sure to see the anaphylaxis and the sepsis live stream so you get this. Now let's go into some of the people out there. Well, many people are selling glucose as helping those with brain injuries or brain issues. Same thing that people are selling methylene blue to people on. Methylene blue inhibits ALDH. We went over this thoroughly. Glucose inhibits ALDH. So let's go into this. Do people with head injuries have more bile in their blood? Let's see. Serum bilirubin, bilirubin, bile leaking into the blood. Serum bilirubin level correlates with the risk of death in patients with traumatic brain injury. So the GCS is the Glasgow Coma Scale. Direct bilirubin is DBIL. Glasgow Coma Scale and DBI, the direct bilirubin, had comparable area under the curve value on predicting mortality in traumatic brain injury patients. So this is like their non-survivors had lower GCS and a higher level of serum total bilirubin and direct bilirubin. Oh, wait, I got to fix that. Oh, come on. There we go. How does a traumatic brain injury cause your liver to leak more bile? Oh, did you know that bile in the blood, you get enough bile in the blood, this was shown in the Rockefeller studies on toxic bile, too much bile in the blood would cause the dogs to go into a coma if it didn't kill them. This is bile in the blood. This is bile in the blood. This is bile in the blood. The more bile in the blood you have, the worse your problem. It's associated with brain injuries. Moreover, predictive model 1 consisted of Glasgow Coma Scale, glucose, lactate dehydrogenase, and direct bilirubin had the highest area under the curve predictive value. Glucose. Why would they have high blood glucose? Because they're trying to shut down the bile? You following? The most coma, the most bile. The glucose, trying to shut down the bile. Lactate dehydrogenase, well, they got liver injury. That's a liver enzyme. And direct bilirubin, the most bile in the blood. You put those all together, you had the best prediction of whether they were going to die or not. Direct bilirubin is a significant risk factor of mortality in traumatic brain injury patients. But again, I mean, we showed in another episode of the live stream, a way old one, that people who had more like emotional trauma when they were children had more bile leaking into their blood. All these things can cause more bile to leak into your blood. So you could get a brain injury and have bile leaking into your blood. And then you could take things like high doses of glucose or high doses of vitamin C or methylene blue to shut down your ALDH, shut down your bile production. You put less bile into the blood. That bile is not going to your brain and aggravating things. And you feel better. Is this fixing the problem? What will happen when you stop shutting down your bile? You stop the glucose. You stop the ascorbic acid. You stop the methylene blue. The ALDH starts coming back online. You start dumping bile again, but now the bile is even more toxic because all that time you were not pooping out much bile. And all that toxicity is basically just staying in you and circulating around in your bloodstream. And finally, it's going to come out. And it's going to be worse. We've seen it. Hear me now, believe me later. Now let's just go over, has this been done before? Hey, wait, here's a site. Ray Peat's site himself. 2006 to 2016. Ray Peat thought sugar was going to fix diabetes. Now people on Ray Peat forums are getting diabetes. Okay, so let's just read this. And they're doing a lot of sucrose, which is table sugar, which is half glucose. In an earlier newsletter, I wrote about P.A. Piori in Paris in 1864 and Dr. William Budd in England in 1867, who treated diabetes by adding a large amount of ordinary sugar, sucrose, to the patient's diet. Glucose was known to be the sugar appearing in the diabetic's urine, but sucrose consists of half glucose and half fructose. Why did this treatment die? Why did they stop it? In 1874, E. Coles in Germany reported that diabetics could assimilate fructose better than glucose, whatever that's supposed to mean long term. In the next decades, there were several more reports on the benefits of feeding fructose, including the reduction of glucose in the urine. With the discovery of insulin in 1922, fructose therapy was practically forgotten until the 1950s, when new manufacturing techniques began to make it economical to use. Its use in diabetic diets became so popular that it became available in health food stores and was also used in hospitals for intravenous feeding. Why has it died? You can go buy fructose all day long. Go and drink some, 70% agave nectar. Go show me how it works. Do we not know enough about fructose now? Do we not know enough about glucose now that the reason why people are not generally doing these things is because they didn't work? 1950s was when they could start taking fructose as much as they wanted. It was in health food stores because bullshit gets sold in health food stores. You can sell anything in a health food store. Why aren't they using fructose for intravenous feeding anymore? Come on, this has been a fad before. You just got sucked into a rehashed fad. The parasites cause everything fad is another rehashed fad by the pharma cartel to get you to suck down ivermectin and HCQ. You don't have to believe me. I'll be right, though. Now, let's go into... there was the rice diet for diabetes and weight loss. This was Ray Peat's mentor was into the rice diet. He also went to trial for whipping women who didn't stay on the diet. That was a really interesting thing. You can look that up. Now, there was the white rice diet, and let's just go into, so people, what I always ask is why isn't white rice fixing the same stuff that glucose is? Why is white rice, which is all glucose, white rice is just chains of glucose, which we can break apart. Why is white rice not fixing the problem? Is it because it's absorbed too slowly to cause the drug-like effect of taking spoonfuls of glucose? That would be my guess. But let's just look at this one. Well, okay, so if this is all glucose, and glucose doesn't cause liver problems, and glucose doesn't cause blood sugar problems. So daily, this is Harvard. I could go find I could go find the actual paper. You could if you want. It's in the BMJ. I just got this for the short thing. Daily dose of white rice linked to diabetes. Trends over 22 years of follow-up showed that each daily serving of 5.6 ounces, about, I don't know what that used to be, half a cup, maybe 1 cup of cooked white rice, is associated with an 11% higher risk of developing diabetes. People who ate the most white rice saw a 27% boost in risk, said a study in the British Medical Journal. You can go find it if you want. Am I becoming totally anti-white rice now? No, because the two people who fixed their type 1 diabetes basically did a diet of beef and white rice. Then there's Grant's prison diet, where he's doing white or brown rice and beef or bison and black beans. Can rice be done? Yes. Should we be shoveling spoonfuls, cupfuls of corn sugar powder into our mouths? No, that's a very different thing. Also, Grant's doing soluble fiber, which I would suggest to people on a, low vitamin A diet, some sort of soluble fiber coming from somewhere. Okay. But yeah, that should wake you up that the glucose in rice is not innocent. Okay. But am I anti-carb now? No. But I will tell you, actually, Will Neville and Brian Bray, Will told me this, that once we started talking about glucose and carbs in general slowing down ALDH, which slows down bile production, they both went to basically just beef and beans. And they said their poops were basically coming out spinach green because they're dumping so much bile into it. So they increased their bile dumping by reducing their carbs and going to beans, which are the slowest insulin response, glycemic response. Beans give the steadiest blood sugar response of any food tested for the most hours. It's like 6 hours or something. They give it a fairly steady blood sugar response. And then, so it's a slow release carb, and it's not tons of carbs. It's the cowboy diet. We talk about the cowboy diet, beef and beans. So for those of you, let's even say, your ALDH is slow, or let's even say you're Asian and you're doing tons of carbs. You've already got slow ALDH and you're doing tons of carbs. I mean, that study, that Harvard study was in China, Japan, the United States, and Australia. So Joe wants me to specify the kind of beans. I'm going to give you the specific. It's the type you cook and you eat as beans, like not green beans, not peanuts, not soybeans, not what's another one? I think that's the ones that we don't really. I mean, can some people eat green beans on the low vitamin A diet? I'm fine with that, but we just don't count them as beans. Like when I mean beans, I mean the beans that you cook. And they're beans. This shouldn't be that hard. Oh, kidney beans I'm not a fan of, because kidney beans, if they're not prepared right, could actually kill you. You can look that up. The lectin in them is so bad that it could kill you. I don't like to eat foods that could potentially kill me. I just tend to avoid those. Black beans, pinto beans, whatever. We're talking about normal beans. Pinto beans, black beans, white beans, navy beans, beans. Now, do you have to eat beans? No. Some people don't tolerate beans. But I was giving you the example of what Will did with what he learned, with what we talked about. It was great. I got to meet Will at the National Law Convention, the National Law Institute Convention. And this was right on the weekend when I had gotten into this glucose and dextrose tirade like mood. This was weeks ago. And I met him and I said, I think this is a problem. My theory is right now, this was before I'd done all the research. I said, it's slowing down ALDH. It's slowing down bile dumping. It's a duration paradox effect where it helps in the beginning and it's going to be a disaster in the end. And then Will told me something that I didn't know at that point. And Will goes, oh, I stopped the dextrose like weeks ago. Why? He said he was doing great on it at the start. And then over time, he started to lose his interest in it. He kind of became repulsed by it. His body told him, stop doing this shit. It's not good for me. How many people start some sort of drug, and at the start they're like, this is the greatest thing. Oh my gosh, I love this drug. And then after a while they start going, this is ruining my life. It's a drug effect, right? We can get high from something at the start, and then it causes problems. And later on we go, that was a really bad idea. Like coffee. People get more tired over time on coffee. They're taking it for energy, but over time they get worse. Hey, did you know the polyphenols in coffee slow down ALDH? What a weird coincidence. What do the Ray Peters and everybody else think they should drink in their coffee? They got coffee, which has polyphenols, which slows down ALDH. Then they put in dairy, which is full of sulfur, which slows down ALDH. We won't even get into the vitamin A and the vitamin D and the excess calcium. And then they put in sugar, which slows down ALDH. And they go, don't even talk to me until I have my coffee. I have to shut down my detox so I can function and not be an a-hole. And I'm going to do it with these 3 compounds, which we all know slow down ALDH. There is a science to all of this. I wish other people were figuring it out like I am, but I am the guy who was put here to figure this stuff out for you and help you avoid the short-term shysters who just want to charge $1,000 a consult to try to get you better. So let's go into candida. Hey, everybody's heard of candida, right? We all know that candida, everybody's got candida in them. Why does candida only grow in certain people? Because of their terrain, because of what's in their body, what the soil is. The seeds can only grow where the soil will allow it. The seeds require fertile soil. So if you're not growing tons of candida, you don't have fertile soil. What would be a great food to feed candida to make it grow more? I don't know, maybe sugar? Okay. Remember, glucose and fructose go back and forth. So, important things at the start. Candida feeds on sugar. So that would increase the candida number. Some of that sugar is turning into alcohol or ethanol. Candida can then make acetaldehyde out of that. Let's cover that. Capacity of candida species to produce acetaldehyde at various concentrations of alcohol. Study results that conclude that candida species are capable of producing carcinogenic levels of ACH on exposure to various concentrations of alcohol. Let me get what ACH is. Acetaldehyde. Sorry, that's acetaldehyde. I didn't look at that first. The study results conclude that candida species are capable of producing carcinogenic levels of acetaldehyde on exposure to various concentrations of alcohol. Your body and your gut biome will convert a certain amount of sugars you consume, fructose or glucose, into alcohol. And then it makes it into aldehydes, acetaldehyde, which is carcinogenic. Okay. So then, if you're making more alcohol and you're making more aldehydes, we've been over this, this uses up your ALDH and it slows the processing of aldehydes. One of the things we've seen is that candida loves aldehydes. Okay. Does anybody ever talk about using sugar to improve your gut biome, or does pretty much everybody talk about sugar ruining your gut biome? It's the latter. So let's go into this paper. High intake of sugar and the balance between pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory gut bacteria. So if you actually believe that all disease starts in the gut, well, it does. That's where the bile goes first. That's why disease shows up first in the gut. It's your toxic bile's first stop. But let's go here. Recent studies have shown that high intake of sugars increase the relative abundance of proteobacteria in the gut while simultaneously decreasing the abundance of bacteroidetes, which can mitigate the effects of endotoxin. Okay, so for those of you lipopolysaccharide, those Peters, oh my goodness. High sugar intake decreases the abundance of a gut bacteria that mitigates the effects of endotoxin, that relieves or makes less bad. But they're doing tons of sugar, which is worsening their gut biome, which does not mitigate the effects of endotoxin. Okay? Simultaneously decreasing, so they have, as well as reinforced gut barrier function. So bacteroidetes, they mitigate endotoxin and they reinforce gut barrier function. So they help fight against leaky gut. High sugar diets decrease these. That's bad. Thus, a high sugar intake may stagger the balance of microbiota to have increased pro-inflammatory properties and decrease the ability to regulate epithelial integrity. That's leaky gut. How can you leak bile into your system? Through leaky gut. And mucosal immunity. Consequently, high dietary sugar can, through the modulation of microbiota, promote metabolic endotoxemia. This is making yourself toxic from your own metabolism. Systemic low-grade inflammation and the development of metabolic dysregulation, and thereby high dietary sugar may have manyfold deleterious health effects in addition to providing excess energy. Has anybody ever heard of people gaining weight on high sugar diets? And then one of the biggest things that you ever want to do if you want to lose weight is to take out the liquid calories, which is mostly sugar. Fix your gut biome by not eating sugar. Let's keep going. So let's go into problems associated with high sugar intakes. And again, we're not talking necessarily about high fructose corn syrup here, but high fructose corn syrup is made from corn sugars. Oh, weird. It's like they're all related. Excessive intake of sugar, an accomplice of inflammation. High sugar intake has long been recognized as a potential environmental risk factor for, so remember, genetics loads the gun. Environment pulls the trigger. High sugar intake has long been recognized as a potential environmental risk factor for increased incidence of many non-communicable diseases, including obesity, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes. Dietary sugars are mainly Dietary sugars are mainly hexoses. 6. That's what that hex means, including glucose, fructose, sucrose, and high fructose corn syrup. And they can switch back and forth in your body. These sugars are primarily absorbed in the gut as get out of my way. These sugars are primarily absorbed in the gut as fructose and glucose. The consumption of high sugar beverages and processed foods has increased significantly over the past 30 years. Has disease gone up or down since then? We're eating more sugar and more glucose. Here we summarize the effects of consuming high levels of dietary hexose on rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmunity toxicity, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, vitamin A toxicity. I did a whole live stream on this. Inflammatory bowel disease, and low-grade chronic inflammation. Based on these reported findings, we emphasize that dietary sugars and mixed processed foods may be a key factor leading to the occurrence and aggravation of inflammation. We concluded that by revealing the roles that excessive intake of hexose has on the regulation of human inflammatory diseases are fundamental questions that need to be solved urgently. Moreover, close attention should also be paid to the combination of high glucose mediated immune balance and tumor development, and strive to make substantial contributions to reverse tumor immune escape. Okay, so sugar increases inflammation. What is dietary sugar consumption connected to? And you can't just give glucose a free pass because glucose and fructose turn into each other. If you push a bunch of glucose in and one of the escape paths of it is to turn into fructose, the more glucose you push in, the more will go over to fructose. Do you understand that? That's what I showed earlier on that chart. Dietary sugar consumption and health, an umbrella review. Significant harmful associations between dietary sugar consumption and 18 endocrine/metabolic outcomes, 10 cardiovascular outcomes, 7 cancer outcomes, and 10 other outcomes. Neuropsychiatric, dental, hepatic, osteal, that's bone, and allergic were detected. Moderate quality evidence suggests that the highest versus the lowest dietary sugar consumption was associated with increased body weight, sugar-sweetened beverages, and ectopic fatty accumulation, added sugars. Low quality evidence indicated that each serving per week increment of sugar-sweetened beverage consumption was associated with a 4% higher risk of gout. Again, the Peters thinking that they're going to fix gout by eating tons of sugar. It's so humorous. And each 250 milliliter a day increment of sugar-sweetened beverage consumption was associated with a 17% and 4% higher risk of coronary heart disease and all-cause mortality, respectively. In addition, low-quality evidence suggests that every 25 grams per day increment of fructose consumption was associated with a 22% higher risk of pancreatic cancer. High dietary sugar consumption is generally more harmful than beneficial for health, especially in cardiometabolic disease. Oh, but you can solve all of your physical and mental and emotional and spiritual problems with powdered sugar. Okay. Let me know how that goes. Now, men, especially ladies who love men and men. I could make another joke here, but I'm not going to. What does glucose do to testosterone? All you guys taking it as your post-workout, bro. Okay? Take it post-workout. Refill your glycogen store. Do it, bro. What does consuming glucose do to testosterone levels? Let's go look. You got to put these together here. Okay. Sugar-sweetened beverage intake. Well, that would be glucose in water. And serum testosterone levels in adult males 20 to 39 years old in the United States. Now, mostly they're talking about soda. So they're probably talking about high fructose corn syrup or even just regular sugar, okay? But we're going to nail this down, don't you worry. Among all subjects, 486 had normal testosterone levels, defined as greater than 231 nanograms per deciliter. Do you know how pathetic this level is? This is not normal. Okay? And 59 had low testosterone levels, defined as less than 231. Multivariate logistic regression revealed the odds of low testosterone was significantly greater with increasing sugar-sweetened beverage consumption versus Q1 adjusted odds ratio. After adjusting for possible confounding variables, BMI was an independent risk factor for low testosterone level. The heavier you are, the more toxic you are, the more you turn testosterone into estrogen. Subjects with a BMI greater than 25 had a higher risk of having a low testosterone level than those with a BMI of less than 25. Okay. Sugar-sweetened beverage consumption is significantly associated with low serum testosterone, pathetic serum testosterone in men 20 to 39 years old in the United States. Okay, so that's sugar. That's just sugar. Okay, somebody out there, I can hear them going, but that's not glucose, bro. Okay, so let's go and just connect this to glucose then. Let me get both of these studies out. Okay. Glucose ingestion acutely lowers pulsatile luteinizing hormone and basal testosterone secretion in men. Do I need to read more? Glucose lowers testosterone in men. During the first 2 hours, during the first 120 minutes after glucose ingestion, for each unit decrease in luteinizing hormone concentrations, which is the stimulating thing from your brain to make to your testicles, guys, to make more testosterone. Testosterone concentrations decreased by 86 nanograms per deciliter. That's significant. Okay, for 2 hours. In conclusion, glucose ingestion, let's be clear here. We're talking about glucose dextrose, suppresses pulsatile LH and basal T secretion acutely in healthy men. Suppression is influenced by age, glucose, adiponectin, and insulin concentrations. Insulin would affect the suppression. Probably the better their insulin's working, the less it would affect them. What's a good way to break your insulin system? Take too much sugar. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Abrupt That means like shockingly quick, abrupt decrease in serum testosterone levels after an oral glucose load in men. Implications for screening for hypogonadism. This is low testosterone. Conclusions: glucose ingestion induces a significant reduction in total and free testosterone levels in men, which is similar across the spectrum of glucose tolerance. This decrease in testosterone appears to be because of a direct testicular defect. The glucose is causing a direct testicular defect. But the absence of compensatory changes in luteinizing hormone suggests an additional central component. Oh, so it's not just the testicles, it's also up in your brain. Men found to have low non-fasting testosterone levels should be reevaluated in the fasting state. That's what they did this whole study for. But don't you think it would be important to tell all these guys that this glucose is affecting their testosterone? So if you took testosterone if you took glucose 3 or 4 times a day, would that lower your testosterone level all day long? Yes. And then we look at in the longer term, the more sugar people drink, the lower their testosterone levels. Can we put all this together, please? Why do I have guys get really high testosterone levels on my program and I didn't use glucose or dextrose as a post-workout recovery? Okay. Now let's go over, so since hyperglycemia, remember hyperglycemia is high blood glucose. If somebody says, well, then diabetes it's caused by high blood glucose. No, something else caused the high blood glucose, like toxicity or deficiency or an excess of bile leaking into the system. That then the body is actually, let's say, the body is purposely raising the hyperglycemia, the high blood glucose. It's raising it on purpose to try to shut down the bile dumping, because it's the bile dumping and the bile leaking into the blood that is killing these people. Okay? So let's go over other diseases that are associated with hyperglycemia, since high glucose should fix everything, right? Because that's what dextrose does, is it raises your blood sugar. Okay, effects of the stress hyperglycemia. We hear that one again. On long-term mortality, the risk of death over the long term, I like this already, in patients with triple vessel disease, so that's a type of heart disease, and acute coronary syndrome. Risk assessment for triple vessel disease remains challenging. Stress hyperglycemia represents the regulation of glucose metabolism in response to stress. What does stress do? It causes a bile dump. What does a bile dump do? Well, if you're still leaking bile into the blood, you get bile in the blood and you get problems. And stress hyperglycemia ratio is recently found to reflect true acute hyperglycemic status. And this ACS is acute coronary syndrome. The high level of stress hypoglycemic response, right? Where was it? Stress hyperglycemia ratio. Stress hyperglycemia ratio is associated with long-term risk of cardiovascular mortality, death, heart disease, heart death, right? Disease, cardiovascular disease killing you is what I mean. In TVD, triple vessel disease patients with ACS, acute coronary syndrome, and is confirmed to have incremental prediction value beyond standard SSII, whatever that is. Assessment of stress hyperglycemia ratio may help to improve the risk stratification strategy in triple vessel disease patients who are under acute stress. But why isn't their heart fixing itself? It has glucose everywhere. There's glucose everywhere. They have it high. Oh, let's keep going. Again, I'm going to hammer on this hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia, high blood glucose, has never been shown to be good for anybody. Mortality, risk of death due to the hyperglycemic crises in the U.S., 1999 to 2022. Oh, come on. That didn't work. That's as big as you get. Mortality due to diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar hyperglycemic state increased from 1999 to 2019 with disparities by age and area deprivation. I'm going to tell you, people are eating more and more sugar. They're eating more and more fat. More sugar, more fat equals more liver problems. More liver problems, more toxic leaky bile, and we see more death and disease. The hyperglycemia, as I'm saying, may be a survival response to try to shut it down. But as you saw in that nausea and vomiting thing, like we can shut it down so much with an IV of glucose, but we could shut down nausea, but we couldn't shut down vomiting. So once the problem gets too bad, you can only shut it down so much. So let's keep going. Hyperglycemic people in the hospital. Inpatient hyperglycemia, an impact on morbidity, mortality, and rehospitalization rates. Hyperglycemia is related to poorer outcomes among hospital inpatients. So people who are already in the hospital and they have high blood sugar. We invested the impact of hyperglycemia at admission on length of hospital stay, readmission rate, and mortality rate. Hyperglycemia is an important prognostic marker and may indicate a more severe illness. These patients should be highlighted for a greater level of care. So if you're out there trying to constantly raise your blood glucose by taking glucose, okay. So let's go over so why does diabetic neuropathy happen? Well, let's go over something else that causes. So I believe it's aldehydes. That'd be weird. Let's go over B6 neuropathy. If you did not know, vitamin B6 pyridoxine is an alcohol, and pyridoxaldehyde 5-phosphate is an aldehyde. B6 toxicity. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to understanding-b6toxicity.com. B6 accumulates in your nerve endings, and if you get toxic in it enough, you will get a neuropathy, which is in oftentimes the same patterns, either both feet or both hands, or maybe both feet and both hands, as diabetic neuropathy. What are we talking about that goes on in diabetes? They have slower ALDH. They're not processing the aldehydes. They're building up aldehydes. What happens when you make more aldehydes in a hyperglycemic state? You have lots of aldehydes floating around. You have lots of glucose floating around. You start binding them together and you make advanced glycation end products. So let's go over what is the mechanism of diabetic neuropathy. Mechanism of diabetic neuropathy. Where are we now and where do we go? Neuropathy is the most common complication of diabetes as a consequence of long-standing hyperglycemia or excess bile in the blood with all the toxins in it. A downstream metabolic cascade leads to peripheral nerve injury through an increased flux of the polyol pathway. The polyol pathway, that was the pathway specifically that fructose and glucose were interswitching. Do you remember from that chart? It said polyol pathway. Glucose to fructose, switching back and forth. Enhanced advanced glycation end products formation, excessive release of cytokines. This would be inflammation, like we saw earlier, activation of protein kinase C, and exaggerated oxidative stress, as well as other confounding factors, like, I don't know, too much bile in the blood. Extremely long axons. These are nerves originating in the small neuronal body, are vulnerable on the most distal side as the result of malnutritional, bad nutrition, axonal support, or environmental insults. Okay, let's just say this. Toxicity, deficiency. Toxicity, deficiency. What do we try to fix here? Right? Okay. Sparse vascular supply with impaired autoregulation is likely to cause hypoxic damage in the nerve. Such dual influences exerted by long-term hyperglycemia are critical for peripheral nerve damage, resulting in distal predominant nerve fiber degeneration. Toxicity, deficiency. Okay. Or nephropathy. How do we damage our kidneys? Well, the liver can't handle the bile and get rid of it, so it goes in the blood, and then it goes and it hits the kidneys, and then the kidneys start degenerating. That's that. So does sugar affect bone density? We already know that sugar affects testosterone. We know specifically that glucose affects testosterone. So we can start assuming with that polyol pathway and the hexose sugars that these same things can be caused by either one. Taking straight fructose might be a bit worse. Okay, it might be the worst of the worst. Glucose might be the best of the worst. Okay. So, sugar-sweetened beverage consumption and bone health, a systematic review and meta-analysis. The meta-analysis showed that sugar-sweetened beverages consumption, such as carbonated beverages, were inversely related to BMD in adults. So that means more carbonated beverages, less bone mineral density. More sugar, less bone mineral density. Qualitative review supported the results of meta-analysis. So they tried to check themselves and make sure it was right. Okay. So bone density is worse. Well, what about aldehydes? Let's just go and connect aldehydes since we were talking all about aldehydes and ALDH. How is this all connected? Hold on one sec. Okay. A missense single nucleotide polymorphism in the ALDH2 gene, RS671, is associated with hip fracture. People who have a slower ALDH is associated with hip fracture. More sugar is associated with lower bone density. Sugar slows ALDH. Are you following me here? Sugar slows ALDH. Slow ALDH is associated with hip fracture. More sugar slows ALDH, associated with less bone density. Some people, some of you out there, you want a study to come out that just spoon feeds it right to you. It has to say all of it at once. You're not going to get that. Otherwise, you can wait for the pharma cartel to do the studies that make them look bad, which they're never going to do, or we can put them together here. And if you just want to say, well, you're not right, I like sugar, go ahead. Don't even bother leaving the comment. Hip fracture is the most severe bone fragility fracture among osteoporotic injuries. Family history is a known risk factor for fracture. Genetics loads the gun, and now included among criteria for osteoporosis diagnosis and treatment. However, genetic factors underlying family history favoring fracture remain to be elucidated. Here we demonstrate that a missense SNP in the ALDH2 gene, RS671, ALDH2, 2x2, whatever you want to call it that, is significantly associated with hip fracture. Genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So if these people have lots of sugar or lots of alcohol, they're in a bad way. Association of RX671 with hip fracture and osteoporosis was significant even after adjustment for age and body mass index, which actually, the funny thing is the heavier you are, the more easily you have a bigger bone density because you have more weight on your bones. One of the risks of osteoporosis is to be underweight because you don't put weight on your bones all day long. Okay? Hope you followed all that. Now let's just go into a couple of things about people will say, well, glucose isn't bad for your liver. Supplementary feeding and jaundice in newborns. So these are newborns being born with a liver problem. Okay, so if a newborn was born with a liver problem already, leaking bile, jaundice is leaking bilirubin, bile, into the blood. So they're newborn, so they were already born with a liver problem. What did they give them? In a survey, it was found that the majority of full-term breastfed infants receive supplementary feeds of water, dextrose solution, or infant formula during the first few days of life. Breastfed babies receiving water or dextrose supplements had higher plasma bilirubins on the 6th day of life than bottle-fed infants. Supplementation with water or dextrose did not reduce the hyperbilirubinemia of term breastfed infants. Since it may prejudice the establishment of breastfeeding, we suggest that the practice is abandoned. Don't give your babies water. Don't give them dextrose. Give them breast milk. Yes, it still has vitamin A in it. Yes, breast is still best. I've always said that. And that's what this says. Bottle feeding. I'm guessing when they say bottle fed here, I'm guessing they mean breast milk bottle fed. So, dextrose did not help the jaundiced child who was born with a liver problem. I didn't look up to see if it made it actually worse than the water did. I wouldn't be surprised. And now here's an interesting one, considering all the stuff we've been over. Again, you may want to watch the anaphylaxis episode to find out what's going on, but there can be U-shaped curves with some of these things where you can have different reactions with different amounts of things. So if normally like basic doses of, let's say, dextrose or glucose would generally inhibit ALDH and inhibit bile, the U-shaped curve sometimes means that if you put in too much, you get the opposite reaction. You get the dump of bile. Anaphylactoid reaction to a 50% solution of dextrose. That's a strong solution. 50% of the fluid is dextrose. Anaphylaxis, how could you be, I mean, seriously, anybody who wants to argue this, how could you be allergic to glucose? It fuels every cell of your body. How could you have an anaphylactic reaction to it? Unless slowing ALDH affected histamine, because histamine breaks down into an aldehyde, and then you just flood the system with this, and the system just goes basically apeshit. Well, preliminary results suggest that the higher concentrations of dextrose induce increased histamine release, a allergic response from blood cells, and that this phenomenon is more marked in diabetic and particularly diabetic allergic individuals. Do you know that histamine breaks down into an aldehyde? So maybe the dextrose induced a big histamine dump, and the dextrose 50% solution IV slowed down ALDH, and now the histamine cannot get through the ALDH, so you build up histamine. There's a mechanism for you. We know that the dextrose and the glucose slow ALDH. We know that this says it induced histamine release, but histamine turns into an aldehyde. You can look it up. Just type in histamine aldehyde. Histamine turns into an aldehyde that then cannot get through the ALDH that is all blocked up. And it's worse in diabetic folks because their ALDH already sucks worse. And diabetic allergic, they're even more toxic and their ALDH sucks even worse. What are they toxic in? Definitely vitamin A, probably copper. And they're probably deficient in a bunch of things. So I think we're through all the research. So the bright spot, there is one little bright spot that may come out of this. Again, I'm saying do not use this stuff unless you are purposely trying to shut down detox. You're trying to medicate a problem that happened, whether it's stress dumping too much bile. Oh, comfort food. Let's have some sugar. Or, you know, you pushed detox too hard. So here's what people are doing that is dumb. They're thinking that they're going to take dextrose so they have less detox symptoms so they can push detox harder. It's not going to work. You don't get to do that. Like, you don't leave the emergency brake on in your, purposely turn the emergency brake on in your car so you can put a turbocharger in your car to try to drive your car faster. Don't push the gas and the brake at the same time. Okay? Be smarter than this. Do not push the gas and the brake at the same time and wonder why you're not going anywhere. Or why you're burning out your engine. Okay? The one bright spot in this, that if there are any long-term effects that I talked about where you might be able to help an issue get better for a while, but like I'm saying, 6 months after the 6 months is over, the problem might just come back, and let me explain why again. Slowing ALDH by using glucose or whatever else, slowing it strongly, slowing your bile production strongly, and reducing the bile production that's coming out of the liver. First of all, remember, this is what chemo does. It may give the burned out holes, the holes that are leaking the toxic bile, the holes in your liver cells, the holes in the tiny bile ducts in your liver, the holes in your big bile ducts, the holes in your leaky gut, the ulcer holes in your stomach. It may give these a break from the bile, because normally you're dumping bile multiple times a day. It's like when you dump bile multiple times a day, it's like you get a cut or a scab in your mouth and you keep tonguing it and it never heals. So if you constantly dump bile on these leaky spots, they never get a chance to heal. How do we fix them? Well, we make the bile less toxic over time, and we try not to dump an excess of bile. We try to keep it at a low roar, not like jam it all hard, which is like when people do, let's say, too much niacin for them, or they do too much lactoferrin, or they eat too much soluble fiber, they got too much stress, there's space weather, these things cause a bile dump, and you leak, and then you feel bad. So some of those things we have control over, some of them we don't. We try to take control over as many of them as we can, and we're trying not to make ourselves suffer through this process because it's a long process. Glucose and dextrose are not speeding it up at all. Okay? But so if we stopped the bile production and some of these leaky holes were allowed to fix themselves, okay, you may be able to stop the glucose and see that the problem seems to be gone for a while because you fixed the leaky holes. But what's going to happen as soon as you stop suppressing the bile production? You're going to start dumping it again. It's the same bile as it was before, except now it's more toxic because you haven't been detoxing that bile. It's just been sitting in your liver, making fatty liver. Gosh, sugar makes fatty liver. So then you start dumping bile again. The bile is even more toxic now. The bile ate holes through your intestines, through your stomach, through the bile ducts, before it's going to do it again, and now it's even more toxic. So then your problems come back with even more problems. But maybe it's long enough after you finish your glucose protocol that you don't blame the glucose because it seems too far back in your past, which would be wrong. You just kicked the can down the road, and the same problem came back, but worse. The glucose didn't fix anything. It gave you a little Band-Aid. It kicked the can down the road. It just gave you a little break. It gave you a respite, to use the word that I lost the spelling bee on. A respite is a break. That's the word I lost. You'll never forget that. I'll never forget that word. You lose on a word in a spelling bee, you'll never forget how to spell it again. I know that. So now, that's about all I have on that. After all of that, why do I think we're not seeing tons of testimonials or tons of people talking about their successes, or more importantly, their failures on this adventure they're trying to go on? I'm going to tell you, this glucose dextrose thing just sounds like biohacker bullshit to me. It's people trying to take a shortcut. Here, eat sugar. I think people are going to be quite embarrassed that they did this. That they thought, after all the things they've learned in health, especially all of you in the Love Your Liver program, and y'all are going and getting duped into taking corn sugar. You all should know better. And yes, you should be a little embarrassed when this goes bad. I think so. And yes, I'm being like the disciplinarian father here. Yes, you are making a mistake. Yeah, you may feel better. That's what drugs do. They make you feel better short term. And then when it goes bad, you're not going to want to tell anybody and remind people that, why would anybody, seriously, in this health world today, is somebody going to go out everywhere and tell everybody, hey, I was taking spoonfuls and spoonfuls and spoonfuls or cupfuls of sugar in water in a day, and it helped for a while, and then it went bad. And everybody's going to be like, no joke. You were taking sugar. You were drinking glassfuls of sugar water. What did you expect to happen? But it felt so good for the short time. That's what drugs do. You are masking symptoms by slowing down your detox. I have now shown that you slow down ALDH with sugar. I've shown examples in the real world. I've shown examples in the diseases. I've shown all this stuff. Remember, the links to this will be in the Google Doc. It's in the live chat now. It will also be, I'll put this Google Doc link in the show notes below. If you want to look at any of our people we associate with, like, oh, one good news, very good news. Kelsey's store is back up. So if you want to go get some of her niacin products, she put a pause on her store for a while to streamline things and make things better. Her store is back up. I absolutely suggest I love her products. I actually would have normally taken my Naya soda this morning, and I forgot to make it because I was so late already, and I had so much going on in my brain about this show. But yeah, I'll be going and taking my Naya soda soon after this. Love that stuff. And yes, it does have a little bit of sugar in it. Let's go back to that. After you watch all this, am I anti-carb? Because people are immediately doing this. I don't know why people have to think so black and white. I tell people, don't add sugars. Wait, has this been something in the Love Your Liver program the whole time? Don't add sugars. Hey, that's been around a while. It's going to stay. Don't add fats unless you really need to for calories. Like eat the fats in foods. Eat the sugar in foods if you're going to. Don't add fats and sugars. How can they cause cholestasis, toxic leaky bile in animal studies? They can do 3 things. Give excess sugar. Give excess fats. Give inadequate protein. So am I anti-carb? No, I had my 2 bananas this morning, and I'll probably have a tortilla at lunch. I'm not avoiding carbs completely, but I'm also not going crazy on them and drinking powdered sugar. Okay? There is a huge difference. So if anybody tries to say I'm anti-carb now, you missed the boat, and you should probably go back to kindergarten because you need to catch on to like reading comprehension. Okay? I know people are going to do that. So that's what I've got here. I needed to do this to get it off my chest. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me see. We got 2 testimonials to go over real quick. Oh, yeah. If you want to join the Love Your Liver program, our do-it-yourself program of my life's work, where avoiding sugar was listed, that's members.nutritiondetective.com. Let me go find these testimonials. Here it is. And just remember, the people who are going to argue against me the hardest on this, I will say I told you so. And I'll chuckle as I do it. So let's go. Joe, are you showing it? Let me see. Yeah, you can show this one. Okay, so we're going over 2 testimonials. First one, I won't say his name. I don't say people's names. Here we go. Dear Dr. Garrett Smith, I'm writing to you for 2 reasons. First, to thank you for your work, which has helped me to regain my health. And second, to ask your consideration of a proposal. We're not going to go over the proposal part. I am a qualified nutritionist from the UK who, like many other, quote, health nuts, actually ruined my health by over-consuming nutrient-dense and high vitamin A foods, including raw, fatty dairy. No, raw dairy is not good for you. And raw eggs. I was not necessarily a Ray Peter, as you sometimes call them, but my diet was in that vein. Actually, that's vein like that, yes. With much of it based on the work of Agenus von der Planitz and Weston A. Price. Okay, I did all that. I did the primal diet, the Agenus von der Planitz, the like raw meat, raw liver, raw egg yolks and raw eggs and raw dairy and raw honey. I did all that. And Weston A. Price is just sort of similar. They just cook their food a bit more. So raw dairy, raw eggs, that kind of stuff. So I did this. So let's go into, he ruined his health doing these. I adopted a high-fat, high vitamin A diet in around 2019 and thought I was doing all the right things for my health. I did too. However, I slowly started to notably worsen from late 2022, and in the summer of 2023, it became so bad that I was forced to essentially withdraw from normal life in search of answers to what plagued me. Look at this. He started it 2019. He had the honeymoon phase. He slowly started to notably worsen in late 2022. 3 years later, all you freaking liver people who think you're doing so well now, wait a couple years. This is why I say it's like a siege. All I have to do is wait you out. You're going to ruin yourself, and I'm going to point and say, I told you so. I'm getting tired of being nice about it. Can you tell? Y'all are making mistakes. You're hurting yourself, and it's going to bite you in the butt. And I show you over and over that people do this. And then there's still people out on Twitter who are like, bro, I'm going to eat my liver, and I enjoy it. And okay. Paul Saladino cut down on his liver consumption by like 90% or more, and now he stopped doing pure carnivore, and now he's eating high vitamin A fruits with it, and butter, and like, And people who watch his stuff, I don't, keep saying he's slowly looking worse. Okay, this is a slow burn poisoning. It's a slow burn. 3 years on a high vitamin A diet. 3 years. Okay, he was a high performing athlete, training 8 to 10 times per week and working a corporate job in London at the time. And both of these suffered the effects of my deteriorating health. So we got like a Chad. We got like, he's working a high performing job, corporate job, training 8 to 10 times a week. He was doing well. God, this is the picture of like the Twitter meatheads who come at me and they're eating liver and they're young and they're lean and they're buff and they're like, dude, I don't listen to anything you say. Look at me. And I'm like, just wait. I'm not, this person figured it out. This person we'll get to see. I entertained and investigated countless possibilities of what could be causing my health problems, tried innumerable different diets, supplements, and health hacks, spending a fortune along the way, yet I only declined further. My main symptoms were chronic fatigue and a truly debilitating skin position, folliculitis decalvans, and dissecting cellulitis of the scalp, and a generally aggressive acne on my neck and chest, among others. I want to say this here. I did stuff like this. Why do you think I'm here as the old grizzled veteran telling you things to not make mistakes on, like sugar powder and eating liver? So I did what this gentleman did. I'm just further along. That's it. I came across your work in late 2023, devoured your YouTube live streams. They are addictive. I know that, yes. And it's okay to be addicted to my live streams. And join the Love Your Liver program. I am pleased to say that I've experienced significant improvements since this time, and my health is now almost fully recovered. No glucose powder? Yeah. After applying many of your recommendations, I have overcome the following, either completely or almost completely. Oh, wait, and there was probably no eggs either. No ascorbic acid. No choline thrown in other than the choline in meat. Anyway, chronic fatigue, 95% resolved. Depression, 100% resolved. Dizzy spells and feeling faint, 95% resolved. Constipation or pale, greasy stools, steatorrhea, 100% resolved. Severe EPI, exocrine pancreatic insufficiency. Fecal elastase measured 74 micrograms per gram in early January 2024 and greater than 800 micrograms per gram by end of February 2024, 100% resolved by lab testing. Severe acne on chest, neck, and face, 100% resolved. Folliculitis and dissecting cellulitis of scalp, 50% improved. This was the first symptom to appear. He's just saying, so I expect it to be the last one to resolve. This is correct. Weight loss, about 220 pounds at 6'7". He's a big boy, down to 194 pounds. Normal weight now restored, 100% resolved. Although I should add that this is the progress I've experienced by implementing only what I have learned in the Love Your Liver program and from your live streams. So how much did he spend on my information? For those of you out there who are like, I can't believe you charge. Why don't you just give it all away for free? Well, I do like to feed my family and have a roof over my head. And I do want people who come into the Love Your Liver program to actually invest some energy in the program. Not just get everything for free, but people out there who love to call me a grifter. This gentleman watched the live streams free and he joined the Love Your Liver program, $99 a year. And that's what he spent to get back his health. Do you see this list? How much are you spending a year to try to fix all this crap? And it could be $99 in a year. Huh. Grifter. Somebody uses that word on Twitter, they're blocked immediately. Like, imagine how much work was done for this gentleman for $99 a year. Okay, I have also used the magnesium lotion, which is good stuff, and liquid zinc, more good stuff. But I am still yet to try the niacin and the lactoferrin as well as the charcoal. I want to consistently achieve 2 bowel movements a day before incorporating this for fear of constipation. That's fine. Remember, you can also, folks, if you want to do charcoal, but you're tending towards constipation, I consider it okay to use something like magnesium to help you poop so that you can take charcoal. That is one time, kind of with a little bit of it's a little bit of pushing on the gas and pushing on the brake, right? The charcoal slows your bowels down a little bit, but the magnesium speeds them up. So we're still keeping you pooping, right? We're taking a thing that constipates and the thing that moves your bowels. But it's magnesium and charcoal. Like, give me a break. They're both good for you. Okay? So what I'm saying is, if you can use something that we use as like one of the Love Your Liver constipation helpers, as I have them in the what's the article? The order of adding stuff. You can do that. To take more charcoal, you could use something like magnesium to help you poop. I'm okay with that. As such, I believe I have much more progress to come, and that in time I will actually be in better health than I was before this whole saga begun. I am now very confident that my issues were largely the result of an overburdened liver. Excessive raw butter, milk, eggs, and cream consumption, all rich in vitamin A, placed enormous stress on my biliary system, and I believe that's the bile ducts, and I believe induced my cholestasis, which, in combination with a relatively high fructose, especially orange juice, Ray Peters, and low fiber / starch intake, had a downstream effect of greatly disturbing my pancreas, microbiome, and my digestion as a whole. Yes. The route to correcting my health involved many things, but chief among them was restoring gut motility and reducing the burden on the liver by removing excessive fats and vitamin A-rich foods. Correct. I also used various other healing modalities like sauna, movement, sunlight exposure, and grounding. All totally great. The vastness of information you have put out into the public domain, much of it for free, is staggering. Grifter. Oh, please. And I believe it is second to none, both in terms of its comprehensiveness and its value. For this, I would like to thank you. Your work has been life-changing, and it has better informed me on many aspects of health and nutrition, but chief among them are the mechanisms by which toxic bile causes so many different diseases and symptoms. This concept is revolutionary. Thank you very much. You gave me goosebumps. The evidence on vitamin A being a toxin and causing cholestasis. This shook up what I thought I knew, to say the least. Bile dumps, how they're induced, what we call agitators, and how to mitigate the symptoms they can cause. We talk about that all the time. Or how you could take things to suppress your ALDH and suppress your bile, like we talked about today. Sugar powder. The importance of soluble fiber as a bile soaking up agent rather than simply something to encourage gut motility. Yes, too much fiber, soluble fiber, can soak up too much bile and constipate you. Other soluble fiber, if you're good with soluble fiber, it tends to trigger bile dumping, and if it doesn't soak up all the bile, then it helps you poop more. We can have two people with massively different responses to soluble fiber, and that's okay. So you listen to your body. This is one of the biggest things I teach in my program, is you are actually going to listen to your body, not with what feels good, though. People turn this, so I have, doc, it hurts when I do this. Well, then don't do that. But that does not mean the opposite is true. That does not mean, hey, I feel good when I drink sugar powder, so I'm going to drink sugar powder all day. No. Just because you think you feel good on something, I mean, go do heroin. I mean, they feel good for a while. Like, that doesn't work. The feeling good on things. How do you think most people got into this situation? We don't do the things that feel bad, kind of the via negativa kind of idea. Okay? We avoid the things that make us feel bad. And then we pick the things that are good for us based on, well, the framework I've created. The debunking of much of the established alternative beliefs on nutrition, particularly pertaining to various micronutrients such as toxic copper, toxic B6, toxic vitamin D, toxic vitamin E, toxic manganese, and EPA, DHA from toxic fish oils. Oh, don't forget toxic cod liver oil. We got to do that one too. I also love the concepts you have coined / promoted, such as duration paradox, retracing, and the poison always wins, etc. I didn't coin retracing. That's definitely not me. That's been around a long time. But the duration paradox is definitely mine. And the poison always wins, I think so, is too. There are many more things too besides the above, and your work has probably done more to inform my perspective than that of any single person I have encountered in the decade I've spent immersed in the world of alternative health. Well, thank you. At the depths of my suffering, I prayed to God for recovery and vowed that if I got better, I would devote a large chunk of my time and energy to helping others who are suffering as I did. I had long had intentions to focus more on nutrition and health for my primary work, it being hitherto a part-time endeavor. the British spelling, since completing my Master's of Science in 2019, but the ordeal I've had with my health has brought me to a point where I'm certain that this is the direction in which I want to go. Well, I can tell you he wants to learn how to become a practitioner. I'll give you that short version of it. And we are working on that. We are working on a training thing. Do not email Julie and ask her when it's going to be. Let me repeat that. Julie and I, we've been discussing a training seminar. Do not email Julie asking her when it's going to be. We will announce it when it comes out. So if you go and you email Julie, if you want to get put on a list for it, email Julie. If you want us to contact you when it comes out specifically, email Julie. Do not ask her when it's coming out. Do not ask her information about it. We haven't figured all that out yet. But if you want to get put on the list, then you can email her. So, I want to say here too, at the depths of my suffering, I prayed to God for recovery. I want to say, give you a simple thing to pray about if you are one to pray. You pray for solutions to come. This, not only are you praying for solutions to come, and then God helps those who help themselves. So you're praying for the solution to come so you can use the solution, because that's you helping yourself. God helps those who help themselves. You're praying for the solution to appear, and then by doing that, you are putting yourself in the mindset that you are looking for solutions. So not only are you actively making your mind look for solutions, but you're praying for solutions to come, and you're saying, I have work to do, because your health is your responsibility. And if you don't work on it, nobody else is going to do it. God is not going to come and it's very unlikely that God is going to come and just give you a massive health fix without you doing any work. So pray for the solution. So now let's go testimonial number 2. Let me open up the thyroid labs. So I have them here. Joe, I'll be right back. Sarah, you're watching this, right? Oh no, there it is. I got it. We're all good. Hold on, let me get these all ready so I have them ready. Okay, sorry, just getting all these ready. These I'm getting these labs ready. Because Google Drive will only let me open up one at a time. There it is. Okay. So, hold on one second. For all you thyroid sufferers, we have more evidence of us actually fixing thyroids without giving iodine. Amazing. How do we do it? Here we go. I stumbled across Dr. Smith's work early 2023 and started the Do-It-Yourself Love Your Liver program around May 2023. So yes, if you come into the Love Your Liver program, folks, you're not getting in there to ask me a bunch of questions. It's a do-it-yourself program. There is a network. There's a forum of people, like a social media site, basically, like a Facebook, that you can ask people questions. It is not, you are not buying for $99 a year complete access to me to ask me questions all the time. It's a do-it-yourself program. It's a program. So I'm glad she put that there. I'm emphasizing it now because a bunch of people think that if you go in there, you're like getting my personal attention. No. I had been receiving support from a holistic doctor who, after discovering my thyroid was borderline hypothyroid, wanted to put me straight on medication, saying, quote, I'd have to be on it for life. Yes. This is the thing about thyroid meds, folks. Once you get on them, they tend to leave you on them. And because you don't want to get off, because your thyroid's not fixed. And underneath it all, if you're not fixing the root causes, your thyroid's slowly getting worse. So you end up needing to stay on the thyroid. You try to get off of it and you feel even worse. And then they don't tell you that it's going to take 2 weeks for your thyroid to ramp back up. And so you never get off of it because you feel bad when you get off of it. And you're constantly, it's constantly getting worse because of the toxicities you're still putting in and the deficiencies that you're not fixing. It's festering, okay? So she said, my gut told me this was wrong. Luckily, I found Dr. Smith and started implementing his suggestions immediately. I noticed a change within the first 3 months. My skin was clearing up. My cycle returned. My cycle returned. My joints were less painful. I was less tired and no longer had awful Raynaud's syndrome. I have had blood work done 3 times over the last 2 years, with the most recent blood, March of 2024, showing clearly that my thyroid is now working perfectly. To be clear, I did the do-it-yourself Love Your Liver program for around a year without medication or a consultation. I did finally book a consultation with Dr. Smith as I felt there was more I could do to further my healing. We discussed a few tweaks to my current regime. It's exciting to see what will heal next. I am so impressed with how far I came by trying this for myself and listening to my body first. This is an amazing community I feel proud to be a part of. Thank you for all the work and free information you provide. Very much appreciated. And then she said, please see attached the blood works proving my healing. Now, when I did this consult with this person, I specifically, she was talking about how, all my bloods are good now. Like my hypothyroid's gone. And I was like, that's amazing. Could you send me the labs and send me a testimonial so I could put this on the live stream? And she was very gracious and did it. And so let's get into the labs. Okay. So hopefully these are in the right order. Oh, I can't zoom. Yeah, I can zoom in on it. There we go. Wait, there we go. So let's just look here. Hold on. Okay, yeah. So here we got thyroid hormones. TSH, technically in the normal range, I'd like it to be below 1.8. So she's a little higher on TSH than I'd like. But do we look at TSH by itself all alone? No. Free T3. Now, this is the rocket fuel of your thyroid. Like free T3 is about 10 times more active than T4. So free T3 is low. Okay? That's what these X's mean. Free thyroxine, this is T4. So remember, free thyroid hormones are the ones that can do something. She was 11.4. The range is 12 to 22. So she was low in this one. Low free T3, low free T4. That's hypothyroidism. Okay? I'm a little snotty today. Okay. Here we go. So this is the next test. TSH came back into range. I mean, TSH was in range before, but it got lower. Hey. Lower TSH means she's having to send out less signal to make thyroid hormones. That's what a lower TSH means. The higher your TSH, the more signal you're sending out to desperately make more thyroid hormones. So if it goes too low, that's hyperthyroid. But generally, we want on the lower end of TSH. Okay, like below 1.8. So she was above 1.8. Now she's below 1.8. So that's fixed. Free T3 is still a little low. Okay. Remember, she's doing this all on her own. Free T3 is still a little low. And free T4 is now in range. So we've brought TSH into more of my optimal range. We've brought free T4 into the normal range. And free T3 is still lagging a little bit. Okay. Here we go. We got TSH 1.2 still in range. This is the March 2024. TSH below 1.8 still in range. Free T3, the rocket fuel, 3.6, which is in range now. Free T4 also in range. So we saw, if we go back, oh, sorry, I didn't share this one. Sorry. We got this one. Did I show both of them? Anyway. So TSH, let me go back here. So we started thyroid hormone. So this is the one we started with. TSH was higher than I would have liked, higher than optimal, if you want to call it that, but it was still in the range. Free T4 was in range. I'm sorry, it was low. Free T4 was low. And free T3 was low. So this is how she started. She was higher than I'd like, lower, lower. So all three were basically out of my ranges. Midpoint. TSH came into my optimal range. Free T3 was still low. Free T4 came into the normal range. And then we go to the last test that she has. TSH is still in my optimal range again. Free T3 has come into the normal range, and free T4 has come into the normal range. This was all, she did all of this by herself, just doing the Love Your Liver program. Okay. So there's your testimonials. I hadn't done any testimonials in a while, but this is what we do. We are fixing things. Should I go search for like hyperglycemia and thyroid problems? See if hyperglycemia is associated with low thyroid function, maybe? Maybe I could do that. I don't think I need to. I think I've hammered on it enough. So we have a couple of super chats I'm going to get to. Please don't send more super chats. I got to get done with this. I got things I got to do. So, N Rustica sent, can you riff about inner and outer ear crust and cysts in the ear tissue? Does it go away on its own after the brain is done detoxing? So inner and outer ear crust. Earwax, which we're gonna lump all that in. Earwax is toxicity coming out of your ears. That's what it is. Because what we see on people who do the Love Your Liver program long enough and they detox vitamin A long enough, their earwax basically almost completely stops coming out. They still make a little bit. It's still something we do make, and we're still always going to be exposed to toxicity. But if you're getting the yellow, the dark yellow, the crusty, the chunks where it like builds up in your ear, yeah, you're detoxing out of your ear. There's also the feeling that a lot of people get where they feel this wetness in their ear. How did I first figure out that the ear wetness was related to toxicity? Well, it would happen to me I would notice it on the mornings after I had a night of drinking alcohol. I started to go, why do I always wake up with a wet ear after I drink? And then later I put it, as I was doing all the toxicity stuff, I put it together. Now, Ramon, we've talked about alcohol on the live stream before. So if you want to detox, like, that has to be part of it. Okay. So one of the things I've said before is I do think that the stuff coming out of the ears, out of the eyes, out of the nose, out of the sinuses is like brain detoxing. I think that's probably one of the really good routes for toxicity in the brain. You know, it can come out, you got all these fluid outlets up here, and if the body's going to push it out, it'll push it out that way. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But we do see it become less over time as people become less toxic. So in terms of cysts are toxic storage. Cysts are toxin storage. That's basically that. So if you become less toxic, the cysts may shrink on their own. Now, one of the things, if you really wanted a toxic area like a cyst to go away, something you could do would be to rub some castor oil on it daily. Am I advocating castor oil use on a regular basis? No. Is the castor oil detoxing it? No. It's binding to the fat-soluble toxins in it, creating fatty acid esters, ricinoleate esters, and it's sending it to your liver. So we are just rearranging the toxins. We're just moving them from one site out peripheral to central to the liver. Would I take castor oil on a regular basis, on a daily basis? No. But can you use it to move toxins to the liver? Like if you had a fibroid cyst or another cyst or something, and you wanted to, you're like, you know, it's bothering you and you don't want to wait for the detox to get rid of it. Well, then you could put some castor oil on it on a regular basis and send it to the liver. But then you're just adding to the liver's load. So, you know, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, it all has to get processed. There's nothing that putting fats on your skin or fats in your body does to detox fat-soluble toxins. Your body stores fat-soluble toxins by binding them to fats. That's how you store them. So the more fats you eat, in theory, the more fats you could store in some place, I don't know, like excess body fat or fatty liver. But does it go away on its own after the brain's done detoxing? Do we see cysts in general and lumps and bumps in the body go away with time? Yes. Might you have to do extra things to get them gone? Sure. We see people have skin tags fall off. Some people had moles fall off. People have had age spots, liver spots disappear. Like, these things are all toxicity. But other than that, I don't have any special approach for it other than like you could rearrange things like with the castor oil. Or you could try to suck it out. You could put on, you could do things. Remember with skin things, there's three main things you can do with skin things or superficial things. You're either going to give it nutrients, which could be like the zinc niacinate salve that Kelsey has at her site. So you're putting zinc and niacin, which are both good for skin issues, together on it. That would be putting nutrition in. The second thing you can do is you can try to soak up the toxins out of it. That would be like charcoal applications. Whether you do the charcoal in the lotion or whether you do like a charcoal poultice, there would be that. The third thing would be you're trying to increase oxidation in that area specifically. You can use various oxidizers. There could be like ozone. There could be hydrogen peroxide. There could be, I'm going to say it backwards, SMM. Things of this nature. You can do oxidizers to speed up the breakdown of detox in that area. And then I guess the fourth one would be castor oil to bind the toxins in there and send them to the liver. You could do multiple of those things. Don't combine the oxidizers and the charcoal though, especially not the SMM one. Those don't get along. The charcoal neutralizes it. So those are the only two you can't combine. But that's how you could go after those. If you wanted to go a little faster in that local area, you can do local things to speed up that. Okay. Ramon says, just got here and don't know if you already talked about it. What's your take on allulose? Which sweetener would you consider somewhat safe for an ex-diabetic? The pattern that I have seen, and as we went over today, sweet things are generally not good for the liver. As a general rule, if it's sweet, excess amounts of it will cause problems in your liver. Artificial sweeteners, sugar. If you absorbed sugar alcohols, then those would probably cause problems in your liver. I mean, imagine sugar alcohol going to your liver. But a lot of sugar alcohols don't get absorbed, so they don't necessarily go to your liver. But then they can cause diarrhea. So anyway, the biggest thing to do is allulose. I haven't done any research on it. Honestly, I don't care to. So the sugars as fixing things fad is coming back. Like D-ribose is coming back. What a joke that was. I used that in practice like 10 years ago. I tried it a bunch with people for fatigue. It didn't do anything. It did not do anything. Oh, but the research on it's so great and it helps chronic fatigue and and then I try it in people and it's like, no, it didn't do anything. So another sugar powder didn't work. So allulose, I can't begin to care about these things because humans are not designed to eat powdered sugar. It's not good for us. I don't care which powdered sugar it is. Somebody brought up trehalose. I don't care. They're not good for you. You want to move to, have some bananas, have some apples. There's your sugar. Learn how not to sweeten your foods. You will adapt to it. You do not need to eat sweet foods. Life can still be sweet without eating sweet foods. If you need entertainment from your food, if you need your mouth to be excited about food, it means you're toxic. And you need to realize that food is fuel. It doesn't mean you have to be like robotic about it. But still, the simpler, the less toxic you get, and people can vouch for this, the less toxic you get, the more you appreciate simple foods. This is shown over and over. Poison begets poison. The more poisons you eat, the more poisons you want. The less poisons you eat over time, the less poisons you want to eat over time. But at some point, you have to say, folks out there who are maybe eating hot sauce on things, you got to be like, maybe I don't need to put the hot sauce on it anymore. At some point, you have to decide to not do it. That's the hardest part, is when you get to that point. At some point, all of us have had to say, I'm just not going to drink coffee anymore. You could be feeling better in all sorts of ways, but at some point you have to put your foot down and say, I'm not doing this anymore. It's not going to come out of the ether and be like, oh, you don't eat sugar anymore. You don't ever want it. No, you have to not do it. You have to say, I'm not going to eat sugar because it's not good for me. At some point, we all have to do that on all of these bad things. I did it on mustard. Like I used to talk about on these live streams that I was still going to eat mustard. I didn't care. Like I liked mustard and I was going to eat it. Cruciferous vegetable with acetic acid in it. And like, it's yellow. And it's like all the things that I talk about don't do. And at some point I finally went, what if I could just eat these things with salt? I remember an ex-family relative who worked for pharma for a while, and she would just say all of these things, like they would just talk about different color. They were selling hypertension meds. They were also pushing the salt causes hypertension. And they talked about all these different sauces, all these different colors were just ways of dosing salt. They were just different ways of getting salt. Like pickles, a way to get salt. Mustard, a way to get salt. Like barbecue sauce, a way to get salt and sugar. Like most of our sauces are just ways to get salt and a vinegar flavor and maybe sugar too. Like they're just sugar and salt and then they put in the seed oils, right? So sauces are like killing people. And at some point you have to go, I can eat this without it. Like I can't tell you now how good when we cook chicken wings at home, they have organic chicken wings at Trader Joe's and we get them and you cook them right. And then I salt them and that's it. I don't put sauce on them. Salt on chicken wings is actually amazingly good. But I used to want to put we had buffalo sauce and stuff like that. I don't do that. I had to give that up at some point. And I chose to. As you get better, it's easier to do that. If you keep doing these things, and so think about it. Here's one way to think about it. The things you are the most attached to, whether that's sauces or this food or, whether it was still drinking or whether it's coffee or whatever, any of these things. Because a lot of people are out there doing one or more of them and they're still doing the program, but they're trying to get off these things. And maybe they're having trouble. You can look at it one of two ways. The thing that is the hardest that you look at and you're like, that's going to be the hardest to give up. And for most people, it's the caffeine and the coffee. We know this. After watching people over the years, the hardest thing for people to give up is the caffeine and the coffee. And it's usually the last thing that goes. Okay. So we already know this. So you could look at it one of two ways. The thing that is the hardest thing to go is probably the thing getting in the way of your health the most. You're the most addicted to it because it's modulating your detox the most. Like it's helping you not feel bad the most. It's the biggest symptom medicator that you have. So what would be the biggest impact on making you improve? Well, it would be taking out that biggest thing getting in the way of your detox, the thing you're looking at going, I don't know if I can get rid of that one. So you can look at it a couple of ways. One, you could look at it as if you're like the hard charger type and you're just like, screw it, I'm going to do it. Then go after the biggest thing. Look at the thing that you're like, that is the hardest thing to give up. Dr. Smith said that's the thing I'm probably the most addicted to. That's why it's the hardest to give up. That's the thing getting in the way of the detox the most and go right after it. That's one way. Or you could look at the various things that you're doing that you shouldn't be, if you want to call it that, and look at the easiest one. Added sugar. Maybe that's the easiest one. Or drinking sugar would be even a smaller subgroup, right? So you stop drinking sugar and you're like, well, that's pretty easy. I cut out the juice. I used to have a soda once every couple of weeks. Maybe I just don't have the soda. Maybe I'll have carbonated water or whatever. And so you decide to do the easiest thing. And so then this is kind of like Dave Ramsey's thing where you you get rid of the smallest debt first and you pay that one off first. And then you feel good about it and you get positive momentum. And then you move to the next debt and you start paying off that one. And then you eat away at that one. And then that one goes away. And then you move on to the third one, which is a bigger one. And so you're knocking these things off. The easiest one first to build momentum and confidence. And you know, if you had 5 debts, if you had 5 things you needed to give up and you get rid of one, then that's 20% of those things are gone now. That's a huge chunk. And you might have been like, well, that was easy. And then you can get rid of the next thing. And then you can get rid of the next thing. When you're ready, you don't have to do all these overnight. But like for me, like very easy. I was just like, don't drink sugar and don't eat added sugar things. I've never been much of a sugar person. Maybe that helped me with today's presentation because I'm just not attached to sugar. Other people are. I've had my attachments, don't get me wrong. So, but yeah, look at the things. You do it one of 2 ways. Either the hardest thing you start with it first, or the easiest thing you start with it first. And that's the, you know, that's the way you chip away at it. You either go right into the mess full on, or you start and you kind of wade into the water and then you get deeper as you go. But no, I can't look at these things and go, well, this is going to be safe for a diabetic. A diabetic, as you just saw, like the kid who was born jaundiced, and then they gave him dextrose and the bilirubin went up. Like once your liver is compromised, trying to find something that doesn't cause problems with it, it's already overloaded. This is what I tell people, like as an example about hormone therapy. Okay, whether women's or men's. Look, if you got hormone problems, your liver is already overloaded and toxic. Okay, your liver's got too much work to do. It's not keeping up and it's already toxic. Now, something you may not know and the doctors don't tell you is that hormones are some of the most complex and complicated and pain in the ass things for your liver to process. So by having a hormone problem, your liver's already diagnosed as overloaded and toxic. And your hormones are low. So you go and then take more hormones from the outside. What does that put more load on? Your liver, which is the root of the entire problem. So your liver was already like, dude, I got too much work to do. Don't give me more work. And you're like, I want to feel better. Take hormones. And then your liver gets even more behind. And then we start seeing things like cancer and heart disease and other things that are all connected to the liver because the liver was already overloaded. So what do we do? What do we do to, like, let's say our guys in the program and people fixing their hormones? What do? We reduce or we minimize the poisons in. It takes load off the liver. We do things to facilitate the removal of already stored toxins. So how do we do that? Well, we soluble fiber as tolerated, charcoal as tolerated. We don't do things to store more poisons. Like we don't take an excess of added fats, like added oils and fats. And we don't obsess about choline because choline is used to store toxins in your liver. You have to have choline to store toxins in your liver. And we don't do things like vitamin E, which can store up to 20 times more vitamin A in your liver. So we do things to get things out of your liver. And we don't do things to help that facilitate the storage of more toxins in your liver. We definitely don't do the eggs thing. Those folks, so lost. Then we make sure that the right nutrients, particularly minerals and nicotinic acid, flush niacin, are there in enough amounts to basically run the detox. So think of the minerals as the parts of the engine. You have to have the right parts of the engine to run it. And then the nicotinic acid, which we do eat in foods too, but the flush niacin, if you're able to take it, is the gasoline to the detox enzymes. So we fuel the detox system. So we put less toxins in, we help get rid of the toxins, and we fuel the detox. It's a pretty good system. It seems to be working. You saw the testimonials. We don't go and add hormones. We don't go and, like, I think in that article by Ray Pete, he's like, oh, diabetics were lacking fructose, so we should put more fructose in. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I used to have hypoglycemic episodes. I never got my blood glucose measured to know if it was actually low, but I would have this thing where, oh, I haven't eaten in 2 or 3 hours and I'm getting angry and nasty. And if I eat, it all goes away, right? Isn't that hangry, right? The problem was not, I was eating plenty of carbs at the time. I think that might have even been when I was a lacto-ovo vegetarian, eating plenty of carbs. Boy, that was a disastrous experiment. But the problem was not a lack of glucose or a lack of carbs. It was that I wasn't using them correctly somehow due to toxicities and deficiencies. And now I fix those toxicities and deficiencies. And sometimes if I don't have enough time, I'll go and I'll wake up for this live stream at 5 a.m. and I'll do a bunch of stuff to prep for it. And I don't eat. And then I go through the live stream and then I go through the inner circle after this. And finally, after all of that brain work, which is using tons of glucose, I go, oh, I should probably eat now. So going from low blood sugar symptoms every 2 to 3 hours and falling apart mentally to going like 9 hours, 4 of those hours doing this, like high brain output and not crashing. What did I fix? Toxicities and deficiencies. Did I need sugar powder to fix anything? No, I didn't. Okay. Sugar will not save you. I don't care how fancy the name is. Sugar is not saving anything. It's getting in the way of things. Now, this doesn't mean I ate 2 bananas this morning. I might have an apple or 2 this afternoon. I'm not anti-carb. I'm going to have a tortilla at lunch. Not anti-carb. Anti-added sugars. Sugar powders. If you're going to do it, admit it's slowing detox. And if you're okay with that, if that is your goal for the moment, go ahead. Just understand what you're doing. Like, we can use these things as tools now. When we understand detox, we can use things as tools. Let's say you all of a sudden get, a big bile dump for whatever reason. Oh gosh, wait, you exercised really hard. What does exercise do? Dump bile. And you took some dextrose powder and you felt better soon after the workout. Was it because you loaded up your glycogen in your liver? Or was it because you shut down the bile dump after your workout? Now, the other thing to know is when they gave people vitamin C after they worked out, which would shut down their bile, they didn't see the growth response, the muscle damage response that was needed for getting muscles bigger and stronger. So when they took a bunch of antioxidant, remember glucose and vitamin C were like this, almost the same structure. They both inhibit ALDH. They both inhibit bile dumping. They didn't see the muscle response they wanted to for growth and hypertrophy after vitamin C. So the same thing happened with glucose or dextrose. When you go and you slam your testosterone down, as you saw with glucose every time you take it, do you think any of this sounds good for fitness? No, it's not good for your fitness. Get past the idea of glucose as just being a fuel. Just like that one of the very first papers I went over. Get into the idea of glucose as an antioxidant and glucose slows ALDH, and then you will be on a much better track. Okay? Joe, were there any more super chats? I don't think there were. I have so many notifications on my phone. So, Joe, was there anything else? Let me go look too, just to make sure. Sorry I didn't have any questions today. Ramon, I got to both. Did Ramon do another super chat? Oh, I did the allulose one. So what sweetener might you do as a diabetic? The only one I can think of would be non-GMO xylitol. Must be non-GMO. Must be non-GMO. And it may still cause you to get loose bowels. But xylitol seems to be the least problematic of them. Does that mean it's not problematic? I don't know. In general, sweet things, in my experience and in me looking in the research, sweet things are not generally good for the liver. I think that's it. I think that's all the super chats. Okay. We're all done. And I mean, if you, okay, so folks, like let's say if you were going to eat oatmeal, let me end with this. If you're going to eat oatmeal and you're like, oatmeal plain tastes like I'm eating wet cardboard, which it does. And you're like, I'm not going to eat oatmeal if I can't sweeten it. You're like, can I add some honey to it or raw honey or whatever? And I'd be like, the goal would be to add as little sugar to anything as you are able. The quote unquote minimal effective dose. So think of it as sugar as being a problem. You don't have to be puritanical about this. But if you're like, okay, I don't want to add any more honey, so maybe you measure it. Maybe you're not just like grabbing the little bear and just squeezing honey all over everything, okay? Just until you think, oh, it's at least it's not going to taste not sweet, right? Measure it. Like at least even use your kitchen spoon and measure it and then add a certain amount. And then over time, as you lose your sweet taste, as it starts to fade, you can use as little as possible. That's the goal. Okay. If you can do like Soil Food Web Warrior says, oats and salt is fine to me. Don't forget, you can do savory oats. Here's a crazy thing, right? Everybody, almost all grains are made to be savory. Some of them are made to be savory and are also made to be sweet. But what is the weird thing we have with oats as a breakfast food where the only way that people eat them is sweet? Savory oats is a normal thing in some European countries. Like it's salt, it's grain, it's a grain, and they use salt in it to make it savory instead of sweet. Like you can do your oats savory. Some people in the old Love Your Liver program told me that the greatest thing I ever did was I mentioned savory oats and adding salt to them. And they were like, this is amazing. So don't hesitate to add salt to your oats instead. Or like I did with the chicken wings, it's just salt. Like, what do I season my foods with now? 50-50 salt. That's it. Once in a while, I'll have, somebody's making food for the family and they're going to add some other stuff to it. Sure, they add some other stuff to it. I'm like, okay, but on a daily basis, salt. So that's it. Okay, I am all done. I got to go do my inner circle now. I am way behind. Hope you all enjoyed that. Don't fall into the sugar trap. It's a trap. You'll have to do a lot of work to fix it. Can it be fixed? Yes. Why do it in the first place? But don't come back to me about the glucose is fuel and all that stuff, because your body will. How in the world do you think a septic shock person is breaking down their tissue enough so fast that they go hyperglycemic? Your body can make as much glucose as it wants if it wanted to. Do you understand that? A person who's in sepsis, they're dying, can make tons of glucose while they're dying. You don't have any glucose shortage. What you have is a slow ALDH system and too much toxic bile leaking into your system, and glucose medicates it, as I showed today. So that's what I got. Hope you all enjoyed it. Have a great week. I'll talk to you later. Either throw that dextrose out or I don't know, do something with it. Stop putting it down your cake hole. Okay? Bye, y'all.